new knowledge sourced from ancient Egypt and other keys such as the tarot, sacred geometry, the Fibonacci sequence, alchemy, hermetics, mythology, and biblical scripture, we can now begin to put these fragments of knowledge and symbolism together and finally have an understanding of what has been hidden from us. With this understanding, we can unlock what was left to us by our very knowledgeable and wise forefathers. Unfortunately, this truth of our divinity was taken from us with violence and torture and hoarded in the strongholds of the Antichrist establishment, otherwise known as the Vatican. But don't be naive in thinking this information would also not be known by the Freemasons and the elite families and royalty. They took this knowledge for themselves and sold us a lie of death and hell. The Crusades were nothing more than an excuse to pillage and plunder all civilizations of this knowledge, so it could be kept for themselves at the expense of the masses, who they enslaved into bondage to serve only them. They murdered almost 1 million Cathars and stole all their scriptures and most sacred holy texts. They called them heretics and sentenced them to the most painful deaths. Now all we have left are remnants of these ancient texts that survived destruction. The rest was stolen by the Antichrist Catholics to be put together in a twisted version of scripture, which they then used to lull the herd into a false belief of themselves and the reality in which they exist. Their agenda is to keep us in bondage to the physical plane, so we cannot move into our ethereal body, and they do this by giving us a perception of limit and lack about ourselves. We are told that we are beings that are finite and that we will die, and we either go to heaven if we are on our knees to them, or we go to hell to burn in eternity. However, worse still, some have now gone down the even more foolish path of thinking there is no higher God consciousness and they are not accountable for anything they do. The truth is, we are all immortal, but as with everything, it comes at a price. We must be worthy of that immortality, and we have accountability for our gift of life, as that is how the universe sees our expression of soul. The truth is, we really do need to be a good soul and have lived an honest life with good intent towards all fellow man and creatures. Then your immortality will be assured. For those that view this as acts of a vengeful God do not understand the laws of nature, because for nature to continue to expand and thrive in perfection, only the best will ever remain in existence. It is just the law of the universe and nothing personal, and we see it play out around us in the physical environment every day in nature. This is also the same for souls and our consciousness. We have to understand that everything always plays out on multiple levels, and our souls are subject to the same laws as all existence. In Hermetics, these different levels are described as the 3 great planes. They are the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. They are not so much even to be seen as distinctly separate either. They more or less merge into each other, but it is basically helpful to view reality as being layered and always playing out on these different levels, in the macrocosm and in the microcosm. But this understanding of accountability is nothing new, for we see this also in the ancient Egyptian weighing of the heart ceremony, where the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. The feather actually represents Orion and the godlight that illuminates the hearts of men. It is no coincidence that we hear this judgment theme repeated across culture. This is because indeed we experience a cosmic event in which our reality is shifted and we are judged. Once a soul is judged worthy of being bestowed with highest consciousness, they are rewarded with immortality on a newly rebirthed earth at the height of consciousness, to complete this infinite cycle of the soul once again. This is why all these great civilizations, such as ancient Egypt, Sumeria, Angkor Wat, ancient Greece, the Aztecs and Mayans, all sprung up from nowhere. And for those that think such a shift in reality would not be possible, even your own scientists have discovered this truth in quantum physics. Though Hermetics knew of this law thousands of years ago, and it is called the law of vibration and is one of the 7 Hermetic principles of the universe, but we will talk more about this later. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution is incorrect. We live in cycles within cycles, and all exist in rhythms of higher and lower, in and out, just like the tide. So we can understand this also happens within the consciousness of the collective souls. We can also see this explained in the Hermetic principle of rhythm. This cycle happens infinitely. There is no starting point that we expand only forward from, as in Darwin's theory. Each and every soul exists at 0 point, with the universe extending out from them in both the macrocosm and the microcosm. What Darwin's theory actually did was keep us bound to the physical plane once again. And once again, this is due to an agenda they have to keep us seeing reality in a certain perspective. However, this is part of a cycle we go through in our descent of consciousness. We begin the cycle in Zep Tepi, as the ancient Egyptians called it, which translates to first time, at the height of consciousness, as all the great civilizations around our planet did, only to descend once again into a time when humanity forgets its divinity and becomes broken and corrupt, full of empty souls who have forgotten who they are. This is the time we now live in, but soon we are about to begin that new cycle once again. The Maya actually were right, but just got the timing a bit off. But that is to be expected when you are orally handing down information over thousands and thousands of years. But the Maya knew it was about the sun changing, and the Hopi mythology also says this. And we must also remember, when we are so focused on times and dates, that the Maya and scripture say the exact time will not be known. Even so, the new energies are streaming in, and all but the unconscious can feel them. And know they are intensifying. Mother Earth is also reacting to this new energy. Her grids are firing up again as she adjusts and readies herself. She is also giving us clear messages to pay attention to our surroundings and our environment. We can only trust our instincts in these times. This new cycle began last year on the transit of Venus. We even saw the Queen take full advantage of this new energy, holding her 60th Jubilee right on the beginning of the transit. During that transit, Venus gave birth to a new cycle on the Sun, and it is important to note that Venus is also the timekeeper for the Maya, and they watch the movement of Venus intently. So this last transit of a 26,000-year precessional cycle is very important. If we look to mythology, we can equate this event to Isis giving birth to Horus, or the Virgin Mary giving birth to Jesus. The new sun Horus was birthed on the Venus transit last year, and so began a battle between Horus, the new cycle on the sun, and the old and corrupted sun Seth that oversaw a corrupted and broken civilization, as told in the ancient Egyptian mythology. And the ancient Egyptian mythology tells of the battle ending with Osiris rewarding Horus as the victor. This is symbolic of the new light of Orion being transmuted through the new young sun Horus, also symbolic of baby Jesus. However, we have to understand that Jesus and Christ have multiple layers symbolically, and it is the Christ light that returns to the divine male twin soul that gives the name Jesus and Christ a connection with the Son. This is why we see such reverence for the Son of God, because it is the Christ light that illuminates within the divine male, who is the Ark of the Covenant. The Lamb of God is God returning a part of himself to the divine male soul. The divine female twin soul is the embodiment of the moon, and she is more connected to the ethereal. She is represented by Isis, but Isis also has aspects of Venus, especially when Horus is connected with her. The divine female soul is the Holy Grail, and she receives her knowledge directly from God. The scriptures and mythology are all telling the same story, and that it is both the divine male and female twin souls that must bring forth divine knowledge together. This is because this knowledge originates in the ethereal realm of the divine, and as such, males and females are equal in both skills and intellect. So it is clear now why we are seeing biblical events unfolding around the planet, and intense cosmic and celestial changes upon us. That light from Orion is returning to illuminate us once again, so we can once again access divine knowledge in a time of higher consciousness. We see this returning consciousness also present in the awakening we are experiencing as a collective. Even though the numbers are not large, there is a definite expansion happening nevertheless. Each soul is remembering their divinity by order of their birthing onto the physical plane. This, as with everything in the universe, is done following the Fibonacci sequence. The first souls that are birthed through are called divine, as they hold the strongest memory of their divinity and the divine knowledge within them. But with each subsequent soul that births through, this memory is diluted to finally, when we have an imbalance of souls populating this planet, we get the majority with very little memory of who they really are. With this expansion of consciousness returning, what we are seeing in fact is us remembering the truth of our divinity that was once lost to us. We are beginning to remember who we are and the truth of our existence. In the following videos, we will use this uncovered knowledge and the other keys available to us, as well as numerology and symbols, to reveal what has been hidden about our true divinity and what information can be revealed amongst all the symbolism in religious art, alchemical and hermetic drawings, and even authentic crop circles. What they are hiding from us is that we are birthed as souls that split into male and female upon manifestation from God's consciousness onto the material realm. We are all immortal twin souls that were birthed onto this physical realm from the consciousness of our God located in the Orion Nebula. Our God consciousness is known by many names: Osiris, Odin, Vishnu, God, and more. But every ancient civilization around the world knew the importance of the Orion Nebula and our God, for he shapes our reality. This is where a solid understanding of Hermetics is required if you are to fully fathom this information. If we go back to where I mentioned reality shifting and quantum physics, confirming this could indeed be a possibility, as we are all just particles created from waveforms. This is where we need to have an understanding for the law of the mental universe, for it is then we understand that reality is made up of particles all held together in waveforms due to the thought projection of the mental universe. The best way to visualize this is how we see sand particles move into different geometric shapes on a board depending on what resonance is used, as in cymatics. When this understanding is applied to the Hermetic law of the mental universe, we understand that the mental projection is resonance and light, projected in waveform from the galactic core through the mind's eye of Orion, and finally brings us into existence on the material realm through the transmutation of energy of the sun and the moon. The sun is the projection of God consciousness, and the moon is the birther of souls, and the souls are birthed through the navel energy center. Edgar Cayce also confirms this and calls this energy center the Leiden. But it is not only the Orion Nebula that is a consciousness in our galaxy. Each of the other nebula are also a consciousness, and each manifesting a reality and souls onto a realm otherwise known as a planet. In our mental universe, using the energies of the sun and the moon, as well as the influences of the other planets, we are manifested onto the physical plane. But due to the earth always being in shadow half the time, there is another plane that exists on this realm, and that is the ethereal plane. Throughout this cycle as souls, we move between both planes, manifest in the physical form, and when we die a physical death, our soul moves into the ethereal plane to be rebirthed once again in the physical. However, in our truest form, we are ethereal, and we manifest into different containers, so to speak. This cycle of reincarnation happens over a 26,000 year cycle, until we are at the end of the cycle and the galactic core Atum once again gives us a pulse of illumination. Atum is infinite God energy with no consciousness. This is what all the nebula within the galaxy access to create souls and our reality, and this is where souls are returned if they do not pass judgment. Now that we understand the correct meanings of the numbers and symbolism, we see that the truth that has been once hidden from us can now be revealed. If we continue to follow the trail of scattered pieces left to us, we can reclaim our divinity once again. But for us to know our divinity, we must also know thyself. As the ancient Egyptian proverb tells us, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and whosoever shall know himself shall find it. And this is because we are all ethereal beings, but we have forgotten this. So before we can unlock and understand the meanings within all the symbolism, we must first know who we are. This is where the key of the tarot, along with the newly uncovered knowledge from ancient Egypt, help us to reveal the truth that has been hidden for so long. To begin to know ourselves, we must once again think to the Fibonacci sequence and remember that everything expands and grows using this sequence along with sacred geometry. When we use this universal sequence of numbers and the golden mean spiral, along with the tarot, we begin to see this hidden information revealed. Everything in our universe births, expands, and grows using this blueprint. When we look further into the golden mean spiral, we can see it is divided into sections. When we correspond these golden mean sections to the major arcana in the tarot, we begin to understand the evolution of our souls and our true divinity. However, before we start down the path of the tarot and begin to unravel their secrets, let's first get a bit of history to this key that has been left to us. The tarot's original author is unknown. It is also uncertain as to exactly where and when the tarot came into existence. But it is believed that it originated in ancient Egypt about 3,500 years ago and was brought to Europe by the Rom or Gypsies as they travelled to Europe from India. Due to the increasing religious intolerance of the Antichrist Catholics and their attempts to suppress esoteric knowledge and sacred truths from humanity, the Magi who were in possession of this sacred knowledge were forced to encrypt these secrets into the tarot cards to keep this ancient wisdom safe from manipulation and destruction. The tarot was devised using the principles of the Kabbalah, but we can also see symbolism from ancient Egypt, the runes, astrology, and numerology. And they also equate to the chakras and color symbolism. The tarot consists of a deck of 78 cards in total. This is made up of 22 major arcana cards numbered from 0 to 21. And the minor arcana consist of 56 cards. However, it is the major arcana cards that we will focus on to help us decode this hidden information. So now we have an understanding of the importance of the tarot, and that they are not just some novelty for telling fortunes, as we have been led to believe. So let's now look at the first card. The first card is the 0 card. And not only does the 0 card represent the beginning of the major arcana in the tarot, but it is also the first number of the Fibonacci sequence. This card number 0 equates to the Fool and represents Orion, the location for the God consciousness of our material realm. We can see this also in the Visconti tarot cards that surfaced around the 15th century. On this card, you can see a clear depiction of Orion with his club and feathers in his hair. We see that the Rider-Waite tarot card also shows the Fool with a feather in his cap. And if we look at ancient constellation maps, we see that Orion is depicted with a club and once again feathers in his cap. These feathers, as with the feather that is placed on the scale to be weighed against the heart in the ancient Egyptian weighing of the heart ceremony, are symbolic of the godlight of Orion. Some feathers, like peacock and duck feathers, display their colour with a process called structural colouring instead of pigment. Structural colouring is where the cellular structure of the feather or as with the shells of scarab beetles, are actually formed in a way where they refract wavelengths of light to create their color. So once again, we see this connection to changing angles of light also contained within this symbolism. This is where the term feather in your cap originates from. This term was used to describe a great achievement or special honor. And of course, for those whose hearts are equal in weight to the feather, that is a great achievement and special honor indeed, for they are rewarded with the highest consciousness in Zep Tepi, or Aru, the field of reeds, as the ancient Egyptians described their Garden of Eden. We must pay attention to some of these old sayings, as they are actually remnants of truths that have managed to survive. Now, when we look to the Kabbalah tree of life, we see that the very top Sephirot is also connected to Orion and the Fool card. This Sephirot is called Kether, which means crown. It is also interpreted as both the topmost and regal crown. Just like the crown chakra, it sits above the head and is not a part of the body. And this is also why it is known as the crown, because a crown is worn above the head. The symbol of the crown is also seen in many alchemical drawings of the male and female twin souls, and is symbolic of the reuniting with God consciousness, and thus being crowned. This is why royalty wears crowns, as they are emanating this crowning of God consciousness. However, they are nothing but mere frauds that took the opportunity to enslave the masses and crown themselves. All of the other Sephirot below the crown are likened to the body, which starts with the head, depicted by Chokmah and Binah, with Daleth symbolic of the third eye chakra directly located in the middle. The third eye is also related to the pineal gland if we are to take the perspective of this area in the physical and not the ethereal body. Daleth is also called the door, or the door of the tent, and is symbolic for this energy point being the gateway to God consciousness, which is located at the crown. If we look to Hindu mythology, we see that they saw the third eye chakra as a gateway, for they believed that the spiritual energy from the external environments could enter their body through this gateway, and hence they take the utmost precaution in protecting it with spiritually positive protecting forces. From this point in the Kabbalah tree, it descends downwards until it reaches the root chakra that equates to Malkuth. But the symbolism on the Fool card is not only symbolic of Orion, our God consciousness. It is also symbolizing the potential soul before it has been birthed into existence and splits into twin souls of male and female. Once again, if we look to Kether on the Kabbalah tree of life, it represents the primal stirrings of intent in the Ein Sof. Ein Sof in Kabbalah means God prior to his self-manifestation. And this is because God manifests a part of himself within the souls that are birthed onto the material realm. It is also said that Kether is so sublime, it is called in the Zohar the most hidden of all hidden things, and is completely incomprehensible to man. This is once again speaking of God, for what else but God can be so incomprehensible to man? On the card we see the Fool is being depicted in the ethereal, walking towards the cliff's edge in innocence, completely unaware that he is about to be manifest onto the material realm below. In his pack, he is holding the unknown potential of the souls. We see this is also connected to Kether in that it contains all the potential for content, though it contains no content itself, and is therefore called nothing. And we know the number 0 also equates to nothing. The soul's purity is also symbolized by the white flower, At this point, as the number 0 and Kether symbolizes, they are still only just a potential in God's consciousness, for they are not yet manifest. The white sun is symbolic of the galactic core at Tum, and the dog is representing Sirius, or Canis Majoris, which is also called the dog star. In ancient times, the season following the star's appearance came to be known as the dog days of summer, and coins retrieved from the island of Chios in the Aegean Sea from the 3rd century BC feature dogs or stars with emanating rays highlighting Sirius's importance. Orion's belt also points to the brightest star in the sky, and that star is Sirius. Orion's belt and Sirius also line up with significant locations of ancient sites around the world. We see this with the Hopi Mesas that lines up with Orion's belt, and then we see Sirius correlating to the Chaco Canyon. In Mexico City, the Street of the Dead lines up with Orion's belt, and Sirius correlates to the largest pyramid complex in the world, Cholula, the Great Pyramid of the Sun. In Egypt, we see that Orion's belt lines up with the 3 pyramids of Giza, and Sirius lines up to Heliopolis, which is one of the oldest cities in Egypt, and also known as the City of the Sun. So we can see that Orion and Sirius are definitely related to each other and have an important connection. So it is not surprising we see the symbol for Sirius in the form of a white dog on the Fool card. In the other symbolism of the card, we see the ice and the sun, symbolic of the polarity of God's infinite energy. For energy is always equal in polarity of positive and negative. That is what gives energy its force and momentum. So now that we understand what the Fool card is really representing, we will now look at the male and female twin souls once they have manifest into existence. Now that we have covered the Fool card and have gained an understanding for the true symbolism within this card and its connection to Orion, our God consciousness, let us move on to the next 2 cards. For these are the cards that give us the first glimpses into the truth of who we really are. And that truth is, we are much more than our physical containers. We are ethereal beings first and foremost. The following 2 cards are card number 1, the Magician, and card number 2, the High Priestess. Now, if we look to the Fibonacci sequence, and as explained in the previous video, is what all growth and expansion in the universe is based upon, we can see how these 2 cards relate to the following 2 numbers in this sequence, which are 1 plus 1. When we look where these 2 numbers are located in the golden mean spiral, we see that although they are separate, they are still contained together in the first golden mean section. This is symbolic of the soul birthed into existence from the consciousness of God, represented by 0, and splitting into male and female upon its manifestation into existence. The ancient Egyptians refer to this in their text as when he was 1 became 3. If we also look at the red line within the golden mean spiral, we see it begins at the corner of this first golden mean section, containing these 2 numbers. Also note that the line touches only 3 sides of the first section, showing us the first representation of the Trinity, which is symbolic of God and the male and female divine twin souls. Now we understand where these 2 cards correlate to in the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean spiral. Let us look at these cards and the information encoded within them in more detail. As mentioned before, the first card is the Magician, and this card is symbolic for the divine male twin soul in the ethereal form. At this stage, the divine male soul, as with the divine female soul, still only exist in the ethereal state and have not yet birthed onto the physical plane. The Magician stands behind his table with his tools that are symbolic for the skills and abilities he has at his disposal. For in the ethereal form we have access to much more power and knowledge as we are closer to the divine. Above his head is the infinity symbol, showing he is immortal, and there are also 8 red roses at the very top, symbolizing God's infinite energy. For not only is 8 symbolic of the immortal soul, but also infinite God energy, and it is no coincidence that the number 8, when turned sideways, represents infinity. For many numbers are not just relaying a numerical value, they are also a symbol within themselves. We see that the magician's left hand is held up towards God. He is holding a scroll which represents the Torah and is symbolic of divine knowledge. His other hand points down to the ground, showing that he brings this knowledge with him to be manifest onto the physical plane below. The word Torah comes from the Hebrew root yara, which means the mark or the law of God. Notice, however, the Torah scroll is unopened, for this is symbolizing that although he has this knowledge within him, he has no real understanding of it, for it is the divine female twin soul, the high priestess, who has the understanding for this divine knowledge. And we see this symbolized by the Torah that now sits open on her lap. Before we look into the other symbols shown within these 2 cards, let us first get a clear understanding of how the divine male and female twin souls must work together to unlock the divine knowledge within them, and how we see this shown repeatedly in mythology across culture. In the Kabbalah Tree of Life, we now know that the first Sephirot, Kether, represents Orion and God consciousness. So now we see the following 2 Sephirot are called Chokmah, which equates to wisdom, and Binah to understanding. Chokmah is representing the magician, and Binah represents the high priestess. This is also why we see the positive energy force related to Chokmah, male, and the negative energy force to Binah, female, as these are the characteristics of energy connected to the male and female. However, it is at this point I must stress that positive and negative energy do not equate to gender. The attributes of energy are just one aspect within gender. Unfortunately, many fall into this simplistic understanding of gender and use it as just another label, equating it only to left and right brain hemispheres or positive-negative energy. And it is unfortunate to see many who never move beyond this simplistic understanding. Now when we translate this to Christian mythology, we see that Jesus is symbolic for the divine male twin soul, and as the magician shows us, he is the receptacle of divine knowledge, and as such, he is the Ark of the Covenant. When we look to the Gnostics, we see that they revered Mary Magdalene as a teacher and called her the Holy Grail. We often see Jesus referred to as the Son of God, and this is because the divine male soul has a part of God's divine knowledge within him. This is also why he is called the Lamb of God, for this is representing a part of God being brought back to the divine male when the light of Orion, God consciousness, returns, and he has access once more to the divine knowledge he holds within him. So now we understand why the Gnostics revered Mary Magdalene and called her the Holy Grail, for she is the key that has the ability to unlock this divine knowledge from the Ark of the Covenant, who is the divine male twin soul. However, as mentioned before, this is a theme that we will see repeated across culture in other mythology as well. Let us first look to the Norse mythology. And here we see it is Odin, who is not only symbolic of Orion and God consciousness, but also the divine male twin soul. The story goes that Odin, symbolic in this instance for the divine male twin soul, hangs from the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights, pierced in the side by his own spear. This is seen also with Jesus, who is pierced in the side with a spear when he hangs from the cross. And in Mark 15, verse 33, it states, "And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour." So we see again the number 9 is mentioned in both accounts of Odin and Jesus. The number 9 is the number of the divine. It is the Trinity within the Trinity, like a fractal within a fractal. It is symbolic of the male and female divine souls reuniting with God consciousness, and shows each holds a part of the divine within them as well as each other. This is symbolized by the snake around the waist of the magician in the shape of a circle, representing the female twin soul, and the outstretched snake that sits behind the pillars and curtain of the high priestess card is symbolic of the phallus and the male soul. The circle and rod, which are symbolic for the male and female, are repeatedly seen represented in symbolism across cultures. For more understanding of this, we can also look to the yin-yang symbol that shows the male and female twin soul, each with a part of the other within them. Yin-yang is not representing energy as we have been led to believe, for energy must be absolute in its polarity. What this ancient symbol is representing are the twin souls. So let us return to Odin, who hung from the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights. After this time, he is given divine knowledge by way of the runes, but it is said that it is Freya, his consort, the embodiment of the divine female twin soul, that teaches Odin the magic and knowledge of the runes. However, even when we look to Odin in his representation of Orion and God consciousness, we see that he has 2 ravens called Hugin and Munin. In Old Norse, Hugin means thought, and Munin means memory or mind. So here we see that Hugin represents the divine female soul's ability to understand or have thought, and Munin, representing memory or mind, is symbolic of the divine wisdom held within the male soul. It is said that Odin sends these ravens out at sunrise to fly all over the world and bring information back to him at sunset. And although he fears that Hugin, thought, may not return, it is Munin, memory, that he fears for the most. And this is because, as we will see when we visit the card of the Emperor, it is the physical attributes of the male twin soul that are more connected to the foundational characteristics, whereas the female twin soul has more of a connection to the ethereal. Due to these foundational attributes of the male twin soul, as we descend into lower consciousness, they are the first to lose the memory of their divinity. And when consciousness returns, their ability to remember their divinity takes longer to return. We see this also in the Zohar with Lilith leaving the garden in disgust because Adam no longer sees her as his equal. Once again, this is representing the male twin soul's descent into lower consciousness and his loss of memory in regards to his divinity. However, in regards to Norse mythology, it is also interesting to note that the Norse people say that their mythology is not actually speaking of past events, but is in fact prophecy. But it does not end with Norse mythology, for if we look between the many layers of Hindu mythology, we can see the god Shiva and his consort Shakti once again symbolize the divine male and female twin souls in their ethereal form. In this depiction of Shiva and Shakti, we can see that the light of Vishnu, who symbolizes the God consciousness of Orion, is shown shining down onto Shiva's head and then transferred from his hand into a receptacle called a lingam. The lingam is a container and correlates to the Ark of the Covenant. The word lingam is Sanskrit for mark, and if we remember, the Torah is also Hebrew for mark. Shiva's consort Shakti's equivalent of the lingam is the yoni, and due to it being a receptacle for the lingam, it is often mistaken to be symbolic of the female genitals. However, as with the lingam being equated to a phallic symbol, there is no mention of this being the case in any Hindu texts. Like with the divine male twin soul Shiva, there are many different aspects to the divine female twin soul Shakti, represented by other goddesses within the Hindu mythology. The goddess associated with the characteristics of knowledge within Shakti is Saraswati, who represents knowledge, music, art, and science. Saraswati is the wife of Vishnu. Once again, we remember Vishnu being symbolic for God consciousness and Orion. So we see the direct connection of divine knowledge and the divine female twin soul. Vishnu, however, also has other aspects depicted by different gods, and the aspect symbolic for the creation of souls from God consciousness is symbolized by Brahma, and it is said that it was with Saraswati's knowledge that Brahma created the universe. Again, we see that it is the divine female twin soul that has the understanding of divine knowledge. So it is not surprising that religious establishments had an agenda to remove her completely to any connection of knowledge and intellect, and instead made her only symbolic of reproduction. Finally, we can look to Sumerian mythology, and we see it as the god Tammuz and the goddess Ishtar, who are symbolic for the divine male and female twin souls in the ethereal form. Tammuz was known as the faithful or true sun, and we see again this equating of the Son of God to the divine male twin soul. Interestingly, Tammuz is also a Jewish day related to Moses and divine knowledge. The goddess Ishtar, symbolic for the divine female twin soul, was said to have brought the gift of arts, speech, reading and writing to humans. However, it is said that these gifts were kept away from the primitive humans, showing that divine knowledge is only accessible in a time of higher consciousness, when the light of Orion once again returns to us. It is also said that these gifts were not Ishtar's to give, but in fact she had to receive them from her father Enki first. Enki represents Orion God consciousness. So again we see that it is the divine female twin soul that has an understanding for divine knowledge, while it is the divine male twin soul that carries it within him as the Son of God. So it seems that by universal design that no one being, male or female, has complete access to divine knowledge. Therefore, no one being has complete power. And we see this reflected in Plato's philosophical text called the Symposium, where he writes, "According to Greek mythology, humans were originally created with 4 arms, 4 legs, and a head with 2 faces. Fearing their power, Zeus split them in 2 separate beings, condemning them to spend their lives in search for their other halves. So now we have a thorough understanding for the roles of each divine twin soul in regards to accessing divine knowledge. We can begin to look further into the rest of the symbolism within the Magician and High Priestess tarot cards in the next video." Now that we have a thorough understanding for the roles of the divine male and female twin souls in regards to accessing divine knowledge from each other, let us look into the other symbolism within these cards and find what other information they hold for us. First, let us return to the Magician, who is symbolic for the divine male twin soul in the ethereal form. Both the Magician and High Priestess cards are showing the divine male and female twin souls have not yet manifest into their physical state. They still only exist in their ethereal form. We see the Magician wears a red cape, and this red material is symbolic for the divine male twin soul. And if we look to the High Priestess, she is wearing blue. We will often see these red and blue coloured garments representing the divine male or female twin souls depicted in religious paintings. The divine twin souls are often shown wearing these red and blue garments. However, sometimes they are worn on another person to represent the divine twin souls, or even as just material floating or resting nearby. However, whenever the symbols of red and blue cloth are depicted in a painting, they are representing the divine twin souls. The Magician stands behind a square table, symbolizing that even in the ethereal form, he is more connected to the foundational characteristics, and this is because he has more of a connection to our sun, the manifester of the physical plane. Now let us look to the High Priestess card in more detail. We see that she sits on a throne with the opened Torah on her lap, and as discussed in the last video, this is symbolic for her ability to make coherent and rational sense of divine knowledge, which the Torah represents. The curtain behind her symbolizes the veil between the physical and ethereal planes, and she is positioned in front of it, showing she has more of a connection to the ethereal plane, and due to this, she is also more connected to the divine. In Michelangelo's painting called The Creation of Adam, we see God's arm is around the divine female twin soul, who in this instance is being represented by Lilith. This is symbolic for the divine female twin soul being closer to God and the divine. We can also see the red and blue cloth, symbolic of the divine male and female twin souls, being depicted within this painting. However, this connection to the divine is also represented in the 8 pomegranates shown on the curtain. 8 is symbolic for the immortality of the divine female twin soul. And when we look deeper into the symbolic meaning of the pomegranates, we find they are also connected to God consciousness and Orion. Let us first look to where they are mentioned in 1 Kings 7, verses 13 to 22. These verses tell of the pomegranates depicted on the 2 pillars standing at the entrance of King Solomon's temple, which represents God consciousness. These are the same pillars also depicted on the High Priestess card, which stand for Yachin and Boaz. These 2 pillars are representing the gateway to the God consciousness of Orion, and this gateway can only be accessed through the heart, for the gates only open to those who are deemed worthy of immortality. If we look to verse number 20, it says, "The capitals of both pillars, above the bowl-shaped part next to the network, were the 200 pomegranates in rows all around." Now, if we look to the number keys we have from ancient Egypt, 20 is shown to us as one of the numbers connected to the heart. However, you will also note that the number 8 is related to the heart too, as is the sun. And we see a cross is also depicted on the chest of the High Priestess. This is also showing the connection of the sun and the heart. It is also interesting to note that the heart of a human fetus beats for the first time on the 20th day. There is also a connection between the 200 pomegranates on the 2 pillars and the sun, for there were 200 days from the Venus transit on the 5th of June in 2012 to the December 21st solstice. As discussed in the first video, this is when Horus, the new sun, was birthed. The High Priestess also wears the headdress of Isis, who is also symbolic of Venus. And we can see that in the paintings where Mary is depicted with the pomegranate, she is holding Jesus as a child. The pomegranate and the divine female twin soul are also mentioned in another verse in the Bible, with this quote from the Song of Solomon 4:3. "Thy lips are like a thread of scarlet, and thy speech is comely. Thy temples are like a piece of pomegranate within thy locks." We can clearly see that he is speaking of the divine female twin soul. And if we look to Lilith and Mary Magdalene, who are symbolic of the divine female soul, there is mention always made of their beautiful long hair. And the verse 4:3 equals 7, which also equates to ethereal form. There is also a strong connection to the divine female twin soul and God consciousness in Orion within the Greek and Roman mythology regarding the goddess Hera, who is directly related to Zeus, being one of his 3 sisters. In Greek mythology, it is Zeus who is symbolic of Orion and God consciousness. Hera is often portrayed with the pomegranate in her hand, and the cow, lion, and peacock are also sacred to her. So once again here with Hera, we see the female twin soul and a connection to the peacock, symbolic of the changing light, bringing in higher consciousness and with it divine knowledge. However, with the mythology of Hera, there is a direct connection to Orion. For in the Orion story, Hera cast Pomegranate Side, an ancient city of Antalya, into dim Erebus for daring to rival Hera's beauty. This is speaking of the waxing and waning of consciousness and the access to divine knowledge within the divine female twin soul that comes with the new light from Orion. There is also a connection to the pomegranate and divine knowledge in the Jewish tradition, for the pomegranate is seen as a symbol for righteousness, and it is said that the 613 seeds of the pomegranate correspond to the 613 mitzvot, or commandments of the Torah. Even today, many Torah scrolls are stored when not in use with a pair of hollow silver pomegranates placed over the two upper scroll handles. So we can see there is a clear connection within this symbolism with the pomegranates, divine knowledge, and the divine female twin soul. Finally, at the foot of the divine female twin soul, we see the crescent moon is being represented. And again, this is because it is the moon that governs the ethereal plane and births the souls onto the physical realm. Hence, the moon is shown at her foot, close to the ground. And as with everything birthed into existence, this is done with the female energy. And as such, this is also symbolized within the moon shown here on the High Priestess card. We should also note the number on this card and the way it is depicted, which are in Roman numerals. If we look at this number symbolically, it can also represent the number 11. Again, if we look to the number key we have from ancient Egypt, the number 11 is the number connected to the moon and the navel chakra. And as mentioned in the first video, Edgar Cayce stated the soul burst into the physical container through the Leiden energy point, which was located at the navel area. And we also see this in the inscription of the great high priest of ancient Egypt called Nepaneteru, which says, "The West seeks to hide from him who follows his heart. The heart is a god, the stomach is its shrine." So we see there is a connection to the High Priestess, the moon, and the birthing of souls to the navel energy point, and the symbolic representation of the number 2 on this card also confirms this once again. So now we have had a look at the symbolism locked into the Magician and High Priestess cards in relation to the ethereal form of the male and female twin souls. In the next video, we will look to what their physical attributes will be before they are birthed onto the material plane. Now that we understand the symbolism within the Magician and High Priestess cards, we know we are first and foremost ethereal beings who merely spend time birthed into our physical containers onto the material realm. We experience our incarnations on this realm between the two manifested planes for a period of 26,000 years, which is one precessional cycle. As with all things that exist in our universe, everything is a microcosm and macrocosm of the other, a fractal within a fractal. And as Hermetics tells us, this manifests on all the planes, physical, spiritual, and mental. However, the cycle we experience as physical beings incarnating on the physical plane is a smaller microcosm to the cycle of our ethereal self existing on the ethereal plane. This is why some may look at the time frame of 26,000 years as quite a large period of time, and that is because it is being viewed from a physical perspective. However, if you look at it from an ethereal perspective, 26,000 years is not such a long time, and just as our physical bodies go through the cycle of death and resurrection, so does our ethereal self. However, the rebirth of the soul is based upon what is written in one's heart, for the returning light will illuminate the good within each soul. In the ancient Egyptian weighing of the heart ceremony, the heart was to be as light as a feather. However, in this instance, light does not just equate to weight, but also the light of Osiris, Orion. As we saw in the previous video regarding the Fool card, the feather is symbolic for Orion, God consciousness, and also the changing angles of light. We are birthed from God consciousness in our true state of being in our ethereal form. And as shown in the Fibonacci sequence and golden mean, we then split into male and female upon creation. Now that we have been manifest from God's mind, we are bestowed with physical attributes representing the container in which our ethereal being will be birthed into. These attributes are symbolized by the cards number 3, the Empress, and 4, the Emperor. So let us now look into what the symbolism reveals in these two cards about the male and female divine twin soul. Let us first start with looking at where these two cards are placed on the Fibonacci sequence and golden mean spiral. We can see the first twin soul to manifest with the physical attributes is the Empress card, which is card number 3 and represents the divine female twin soul who is first to manifest with physical attributes due to her female creation energy on the physical plane. However, this is also because the twin souls are mirrors to each other, and we will often see this represented in the religious depictions of them also. So the order in which they are manifested into their physical forms is the mirror to the order they were created in the ethereal. Let us now look at how these cards relate to the numbers within the golden mean spiral and Fibonacci sequence. We can see the divine female twin soul equates to the number 2, and the Emperor is now connected to the number 3. However, if we look at the golden mean section where the Emperor is placed, it encompasses all the other sections, and due to it equating to the number 3 within the Fibonacci sequence, this is representing the Trinity held within this whole golden mean section. So not only do we see the 3 being depicted in the Empress Tarot card connecting her to the Divine Trinity, we now see it connected to the Emperor due to his placement within the sequence. So with the Empress equating to a 2 on the Fibonacci sequence and then correlating that to the number keys from ancient Egypt, the number 2 relates to 20 and the heart. And we also see the white heart clearly represented on the Empress card. This is symbolic of her connection with the divine and her ethereal self through the good intentions of a pure heart. With the Emperor being connected to the number 3 in the Fibonacci sequence, if we look to the number keys we have from ancient Egypt, this number connects him to the navel chakra. The energy aspects within this chakra when related to the number 3 instead of 11 are more connected to the sun. And there is a very strong connection to the sun and this chakra, and this is why it is also called the solar plexus. If we look to the Hindu texts, this energy point at the navel is called the Manipura. And according to the Hindu tradition, this chakra is the 3rd primary chakra and is called the City of Jewels. The Manipura symbol for this chakra is depicted by a downward pointing red triangle. The area inside of the triangle is called the fire region, and the yellow circle in which it is situated is showing a connection to the sun energy. And as the triangle is pointing down, this is showing this energy is manifest below onto the earthly plane within the male twin soul. This triangle is also representing the Trinity birthed onto the physical plane, for within every soul is a part of the other as well as the divine. The 10 petals are showing the infinite cycle of the souls rebirthed into the physical bodies and reuniting with God consciousness, as 10 is an infinite number, for if you divide it by the Trinity, you will get an infinite number, 3.3333 to infinity. We can see the number 10 is also represented in the Kabbalah Tree of Life diagrams by alchemists Kircher and Robert Flood, who show 10 spikes or rays at the top and bottom of the Tree of Life to indicate that this cycle of birth and rebirth of the soul is infinite. The Hindu texts also relate the fire region within the triangle to the god Vani, who is shining red with 4 arms and is seated on a ram. So we see a connection to the god Vani, the ram, and this chakra, and the ram's head's on the Emperor card. We also see that the god Vani has 4 arms, and let us not forget that even though the Emperor is in the number 3 position in the Fibonacci sequence, he is still also a number 4 in the tarot. The stone chair he sits upon is also representing a square, which also equates to the number 4 and symbolizes the foundational and earthly instinctive attributes he brings down with him. As mentioned previously, these foundational attributes are also the reason why the male soul is the first to forget his divinity as we move into a time of lower consciousness within the cycle. Once the memory of their true self is lost, they use their foundational attributes to take power and take control over the physical on the material plane. However, this is a result of the waning light of consciousness, so should not be viewed as evil or negative. It is just a part of the cycle of consciousness we exist in. The seed mantra for this chakra is the syllable Ram, and within the bindu or dot above this mantra resides the god Rudra, and he is sometimes described as red or white with 3 eyes and a beard. Rudra is one of the names used for the god Shiva, so we can see a direct connection to Rudra and Shiva, the divine male twin soul in the ethereal form. So we see that Rudra represents the foundational and physical aspects of Shiva and embodies the unpredictable and destructive earthly elements within the male twin soul. However, Rudra was also a healer, so we see these renewing forces are also present within these foundational characteristics of the divine male twin soul. Rudra is also said to be the early form of Shiva. This is symbolic of the divine male soul evolving from his physical form into his ethereal self, represented by Shiva. Now let us look to what the emperor holds in his hand. We see in his left hand he is symbolizing the male and female with the Ankh, with both the circle and rod being depicted. His immortality is also symbolized within the Ankh, as it was symbolic for the key of eternal life. The orb in his right hand is known as the globus crucica and was said to show one who had complete dominion over all. In ancient times, the orbs were held by priests as a symbol of the sun and its power. However, the real truth has been obscured, and the orb is actually symbolic for the receptacle of the divine knowledge he holds within him. This orb has had many changes in the way it has been depicted throughout the ages. However, we can see in this very early depiction of the Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa, dated 1188, that he holds the symbol of the orb as a circle and cross, and below it is a book indicating knowledge being brought down to the physical plane from the higher consciousness in the light of Orion, transmuted through the sun. We also see in this painting by Leonardo da Vinci that the orb is clear, representing that the Holy Spirit that brings in higher consciousness is not definable. The 5 gems on his crown show that his divinity is in his destiny, for the number 5 relates to the agreement or covenant with the divine made by the soul. For the soul's potential is known to itself and God consciousness before it is manifest onto the physical plane. In James 1:12 it states, "Blessed is the man that endures trial, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to them that love him." We also see this Bible verse is 1:12, which equates to the number 4. Once again, the Emperor Tarot card is a number 4. Now let us look to the Empress card in more detail. Firstly, we see that the earthly plane is not shown as rugged and harsh as it was on the Emperor card. And this is because the divine female soul has a natural connection to the higher energies of Mother Earth, symbolized by the 7 tree peaks. For the number 7 is connected to the ethereal and higher states of being. The 8 pearls on her necklace are symbolic of her immortality. She has 11 stars on her crown, and this is showing the connection to the creation aspect within her on the material plane, as 11 is connected to the manifesting of souls onto the physical plane. She also holds her scepter higher, again showing her connection to the ethereal. The scepter is also representing the rod and the male twin soul, and the circle at the end of the pillow is symbolic of the ring and the female twin soul. We also see at the top of her scepter there is the same orb that was on the Emperor card, symbolic of the divine knowledge he holds within him. The illumination of divine knowledge within the female twin soul is symbolized by the pomegranates on her gown. These were depicted on the curtain in the previous card, the High Priestess, but now she wears them on her garment. These pomegranates are showing the female twin soul's understanding of the Torah and the divine knowledge which it represents. She also sits upon a white hart, showing again she is close to the divine, and we see the symbol for Venus is shown within the heart. Aphrodite is a goddess connected to Venus, and her other symbols are the dove and the pomegranate. The dove is symbolic of Venus bringing in the light of God consciousness, and we can see this is represented with the dove in religious paintings, showing the Holy Spirit or light that brings with it the illumination of divine knowledge. Aphrodite's symbols also included wheat, and we can see wheat is depicted at the bottom of the Empress card. In Christian mythology, wheat was symbolic for the children of truth. And in Matthew 13:24, Jesus said, "The good seed, the wheat, are the children of the kingdom, the product of truth, which the sower had sowed." On the ancient Egyptian number keys, we see that 13 is at the crown chakra and represents the death of the physical container to reunite with God consciousness. 2 plus 4 is 6, and 6 represents the physical form. This is showing truth is the seed one needs to sow to return to God consciousness from the physical form. And again in this verse, Psalms 55, "The wheat are the true church, gathered with the sickle of truth. Gather my saints together unto me, those that have made a covenant with me by sacrifice." 5 and 5 are symbolic of the agreement or covenant with the divine made by the twin souls before they are manifest onto the physical plane. And 5 plus 5 equals 10, which is symbolic of them honoring this covenant and living in truth, being their key to this infinite cycle and their immortality. So now we have unlocked the symbolism within these two cards. Let us move on to the next card, the Hierophant. Now that we have an understanding for the creation and evolution of the twin souls in regards to their ethereal and physical forms, let us look at the next card, the Hierophant. At this time, the male and female twin souls have still not manifest onto the physical plane. For before they make this final transition from the ethereal to the material realm, they must first understand their covenant with the divine. This is symbolic of the Hierophant card, which is equated to the ethereal conscious force between the divine twin souls and God consciousness. For they cannot reunite with this divine consciousness again until the cycle is completed. It is at this time their destinies become known to them, as the gift of immortal life comes with a responsibility to keep on a path of truth. Once this information is bestowed upon the divine twin souls, they are now free to decide whether they continue and be manifest onto the material plane or return to Atum. We also need to understand that this transitional stage doesn't result from discussions and conversations. This is done on an ethereal and conscious level, and as such, this understanding is something that is inherent within each soul and the divine. Unfortunately, it is at this stage of the soul's evolution that the religious establishment, seeking to gain full control of the masses, inserted themselves into the role of the Hierophant, making the masses believe it was only through the church, popes, and priests that you could uphold your covenant with God. In truth, there is no human that can stand between you and the divine, because each soul has their own personal connection, for we all carry a part of the divine within us. We are all an extension of the divine, and everything we have ever done throughout all our incarnations is recorded in our hearts and experienced by God consciousness. This is what the Eye of Ra symbolizes, the all-seeing eye of God that measures the heart on the return of the light or Holy Spirit of God consciousness. So there is a covenant each soul makes with the divine and its twin that is known consciously by this soul prior to manifesting onto the physical plane. At the end of the cycle, all of the deeds within the heart of every soul is illuminated and weighed against the feather of truth, which we now know is symbolic of this divine conscious light from Orion. And it is only the souls that have upheld their covenant and lived as good souls that are rewarded with immortality. This is why the heart is so important in all the cultures, mythologies, and scriptures. For what is written in the heart cannot be hidden from the light, and each heart will be weighed. So let us once again return to the golden mean spiral and Fibonacci sequence to see where the Hierophant card number 5 is situated. And we see that it is at number 5 on the Fibonacci sequence and golden mean spiral. Again, we can also see this section of the golden mean spiral encompasses all the other sections, and this is symbolic for the covenant between the divine twin souls and God before they manifest onto the physical plane. If we add the numbers of the Fibonacci sequence up until this section, we get 12. The number 12 is symbolic of the twin souls who are not yet reunited with God consciousness. We can also look at the number 5 in its symbolic form and see that the Roman numeral 1s that were on the High Priestess card are now joined together at the bottom. This is representing the connection between the twin souls as they are about to be manifest onto the physical plane. The High Priestess card is also symbolically connected to the Hierophant, for it is the female creation force that births everything into existence, including the twin souls. We can also see this relayed in ancient Egyptian and Sumerian mythologies, as it is Isis who resurrects Osiris, and Semiramis who resurrects Nimrod, and the goddess Nut that creates all. We see the symbolic connection of these numbers also on the Justice card, which is number 11. This card is symbolic for the covenant on our return back to God consciousness, for at this stage, the discernment of our covenant determines whether we pass beyond those pillars back to our divinity. If we look to the Kabbalah tree of life, the Hierophant card equates to the very mysterious and misunderstood Sephirot Death. Death is like Kether, and they are both symbolic of the ethereal and conscious forces outside of the ethereal physical form represented by the other Sephirot. Death is situated between the throat and third eye chakra, representing a conscious and ethereal force between the soul and divine consciousness. In Kabbalah, death is said to represent a third conscious intellect. This is symbolic for the conscious ethereal force between the divine and the consciousness of the souls. Death is placed directly in the middle of the four Sephirots, Chokmah, Binah, Chesed, and Gevurah. These Sephirot are symbolic of the ethereal and physical forms of the male and female twin souls. Just as we saw the tarot and Fibonacci numbers depicting the mirrored creation sequence of the twin souls from ethereal to physical, we also see this shown in the tree of life with the positions of these four Sephirot. So we have the magician represented as Chokmah, the high priestess Binah, the empress is Chesed, and the emperor is connected to Gevurah. Chesed is symbolic for the attributes within the physical manifestation of the divine female twin soul of love and kindness. And Gevurah encompasses the physical qualities of the emperor and is symbolic for strength, power, and judgment. We also see that death lies directly beneath Kether, and it is said in some Kabbalah texts to be a reflection of Kether. Death is also situated directly in the middle of Tifereth, the heart, and Kether, God consciousness. However, this also includes Daleth, which represents the mind and is connected to the third eye chakra. The path on which death is situated is known as Gimel or Camel and represents the connection from the heart to the divine, but shows that there is a third elemental consciousness that we must pass beyond, which is represented by death. Death is also situated between the throat and third eye chakra, as it is symbolic of the expressed agreement of our covenant between the divine and our twin soul. The path of Gimel shows us that we must pass beyond death and have upheld this covenant to be bestowed with immortality and crowned at Kether. It is the light within our hearts that grants us access beyond the pillars of Solomon's temple to reunite with the divine. We can also see the path of Gimel or Camel reflected in this old saying. It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. Gimel is also the 13th path, and on the number keys from ancient Egypt, the number 13 is also directly related to the third eye and crown chakra, for this is symbolic of the death of the physical container upon reuniting with God consciousness. So again, we see the path to the crown is directly related to the heart. And once again, on the ancient Egyptian number key, we can see that the number 8, which is symbolic for immortality, is connected to not only the heart chakra, but also the third eye and crown chakra. However, we will visit this further when we look into the Death Tarot card in future videos. In this verse from Psalms 119:17, it even mentions the word Gimel. It states, Gimel, deal bountifully with thy servant, that I may live and keep thy word. The numbers of this verse are also significant, as we see it relates to 11 and 8. 11 being symbolic of the twin souls manifest into their physical body, and 8 equating to their immortality. Again, we can also see this covenant between the twin souls and the divine clearly shown in 2 Kings 23:3 with, and the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people joined in to the covenant. The king is symbolic of the divine male twin soul, and we see the verse mentions with all their heart. This is relating to the covenant between God and both the divine male and female twin souls. However, it also mentions, and all the people joined into the covenant. This is symbolic of every soul thereafter making a covenant with the divine. If we look at the numbers of this verse, we see it is 23:3. 2 and 3 equal 5. This is directly connected to the Hierophant Tarot card number 5, but also the Fibonacci sequence and golden mean spiral. And the 3 is representing the Trinity bound by this covenant. As discussed earlier, the Hierophant is related to death on the Kabbalah tree of life. However, the Hierophant also has a connection to the path of the serpent, as it represents the throat chakra on the tree of life. According to the Hindu tradition, the throat chakra is the 5th primary chakra and called the Vishuddha or Vishuddhi. So again, we see a connection between the number 5 with this chakra and the Hierophant card. The mantra or seed sound for this syllable is called Ham. It is interesting to note that some religious belief systems have an aversion to ham or pork. Could this be a strong symbolic gesture enacted as a way to ensure their memory of this covenant was kept? In the bindu or point above the mantra resides the deity Sadashiva, who has 5 faces and 10 arms. Again, we see the connection to 5. And we also have 10, which represents both covenants of the twin souls and the infinite cycle of death and resurrection. The throat chakra is also symbolic of the energetic force we use to express our souls onto the material plane. This expression emanates from what is brought together from our heart and mind, thinking and feeling in unison. Together our feelings and thoughts are expressed at this energy point to be manifest onto the physical plane. The throat chakra is where we speak our truth and our lies. The immortality of our souls is determined by this expression of our soul and our connections with others on the material plane through cause and effect. Cause and effect is also a principle of Hermetics. This is the end of part 1 of number 6 in the Mystery Teachings series. In part 2, we will gain more of an understanding of the principle of cause and effect, which governs our lives, and how this is related to the Hierophant card and our destiny. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This is the sixth Hermetic principle of cause and effect. So there is no such thing as chance. Your destiny is applied to you to test your soul and see if you are worthy of your immortality. And this is a covenant and agreement each soul accepted. We see this application of cause and effect to our existence also related in the Colburn Bible, where it states, "Destiny may be likened to a man who must travel to a distant city, whether or not he wishes to make the journey, the destination being his destiny. He may choose whether to go by way of a river or by way of a plain, whether across mountains or through forests, on foot or horseback, slow or fast. And whatever befalls because of this decision is fate. If a tree falls on him because he chose the forest path, it was fated. For luck is an element of fate. Destiny leaves no choice. Fate gives limited choice, which may be good or bad, but it cannot be averted. What is fated must be, for at no point can there be any turning back." It is when our tests are done at the end of a cycle and we have seen through these tests in truth with strength of heart, the soul is rewarded with immortality. It is then the soul can be at rest and there can be peace within our hearts. As it says in Psalms 116:7, "Return unto your rest, O my soul, for the Lord has dealt bountifully with you." 116 equals 8, which equates to immortality on the Egyptian number key, and 7 equals the ethereal soul. The Hindu texts relay this chakra point is where the nectar Amrita drips down from the Bindu, symbolized on the mandala, and is split into either a pure form or a poison. However, it is also known as the purification center, so therefore symbolic of redemption. Amrita is a Sanskrit word that literally means immortality and is often referred to in Hindu texts as nectar. The word's earliest occurrence is found in the Rig Veda, where it is also referred to as soma, the drink which bestows immortality upon the gods. The Greeks called this nectar ambrosia, and it carries the same meaning. So we can see this energy point is very important as it determines whether we continue this cycle of the soul and experience immortality and Zep-Tepi, or whether we become accustomed to the taste of the poison and experience death and decay. A Bindu dot in a mandala or mantra is symbolic for the manifesting point of that chakra. So we see this chakra is very much tied to the immortality of the soul. And it is not only in the mental projection of our will from the third eye chakra, but the expression of it onto the material plane that grants or denies our immortality. This chakra is also associated with the element of ether, and as such shows the connection between the third eye chakra that is situated completely in the ethereal, and the heart chakra, which is our energy point that is anchored between the ethereal and physical plane. At the bottom of the card, we see the male and female twin souls are depicted about to take their covenant with the divine. The male soul is on the left, and we can see that he is now wearing on his shirt the flowers that were above his head in the magician card. The female twin soul on the right has the blue and white flowers on her shirt, symbolic for her blue dress and white pillar in the High Priestess card. These pillars are also represented on the Hierophant card and the Justice card, for again, they are symbolic of the veil between the physical and ethereal planes. And on the Hierophant card, they are showing that the energetic force of the Hierophant stands between the two pillars and represents the conscious acknowledgement of this pledge with the divine before entry to the material plane is granted. On top of the pillars, we see a flourish on each pole. This is representing the ethereal form of the divine male and female twin souls. They are clearly depicted differently to ensure a distinction between them is made. The Hierophant points his two fingers upwards to indicate both the twin souls are answerable only to the divine. However, the two crossed keys show each soul's destinies are also entwined, and they sit in front of the Hierophant, showing that the covenant with each twin soul is also overseen by God. On each side of the keys, we see a disc divided into 4 parts, equating to 8 pieces. 8 represents their immortal soul and shows that their immortality is bound within their covenant to the divine. So now we have 8 shown on each side of the key, representing the immortal soul of the male and female twin souls. However, if we look on the shoes of the Hierophant, we have our third 8. So now we have the 2 immortal twin souls represented, and the third 8 is symbolic of their immortality being connected to the Hierophant and their covenant. We also see the discs can represent 6, which is symbolic of the physical form, and when we add them together, we again get 12. And let us not forget that the Fibonacci sequence also equates to a 12. As mentioned previously, 12 is symbolic of the divine male and female twin soul before they have reunited back with God consciousness. We also see 12 depicted on the front of the Hierophant's garments with the 3 crosses. Together, this equates to 24. If we divide 24 by the Trinity, we get 8 once again. He holds the triple cross, or otherwise known as the papal cross. The 3 bars of the cross represent the Trinity of the divine and the male and female twin soul. We see the Hierophant holds this cross in his hand, symbolic for the covenant he holds between them all. His crown with 18 spikes is depicting that it is through this covenant they will reach the reunification with the divine and transform into the divine number of 9. And finally, we see again in this verse 2 Corinthians 5:10, it states, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may be recompensed for things done in his body, according to what he has done, whether it be good or bad." We can see the covenant represented in this verse by the number 5, and again the infinite cycle of the twin souls and their covenants are represented in the number 10. So now we understand the Hierophant, and that he is not a religious figure, but instead is symbolic of our own individual soul agreements with the divine. So now the divine twin souls have agreed to uphold their covenant with the divine upon being manifest onto the physical plane. In the next video, we will look at the number 6 card, the Lovers. So now the divine twin souls have consciously understood and accepted their destiny and covenant with God consciousness. They are now manifest onto the material plane to begin their journey throughout the cycle of incarnations between both the physical and ethereal planes. The tarot card equivalent to the transformational emergence onto the material plane of the male and female divine twin souls is the Lover's card, which is card number 6. However, when we look to the Fibonacci sequence and golden mean spiral, we can see it is a number 8 in the sequence. If we add all the previous numbers in the Fibonacci sequence up until this number, we get 20. And if we look to the ancient Egyptian number key, we can see that 8 and 20 are situated at the heart chakra. Although there is an obvious connection to the name of this card, the Lovers and the Heart, if we look to the Kabbalah tree of life, the Sephirah connected to the heart chakra is Tifereth, which is number 6. So this confirms again that the number 6 and the Lover's card are connected to the heart, and the numbers of the heart chakra are 8 and 20. And if we look at the pathways from 4 Chesed, the Empress, through the heart Tifereth to number 8 Hod, we see that the path of the hand, which symbolizes action, is 20, and the path of the eye, which is vision, is 26, which equates to 8. The number 6 is symbolic of the divine twin souls in their physical form, and the number 8 is referring to their immortal soul, and this immortality is directly connected to the weight of the heart. The divine is also connected then at the heart, and we see this represented by the angel that stands between them. And this is once again showing a third conscious force between God consciousness and the divine twin souls. The number 20 represents our connection from our heart to the Sun and the divine. And we see a connection to the number 20 and both the Sun and the divine in this verse from Exodus 28. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The Sabbath is a Sunday and a day of rest because it was supposed to be a day we remembered our connection to the Sun and the divine through our hearts. Once again, it seems the religious establishment sought to implement themselves into this role also, and thus making it a day of singing songs of praise to some overweight priest who was happy to take your money as he passed around his plate. It is also interesting to note that when God speaks his commandments, he starts at Exodus verse 21. And God spake all these words, saying. This verse is showing us that God speaks through the heart. And the heart of a fetus also beats for the first time on the 20th day of gestation. The angel stands in front of the sun in full illumination, not only showing a connection to the divine with the purple robes, but also that the divine is very much present and supporting them in every way when they are first manifest at the beginning of the cycle. And this is represented in the verse in Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. When you add the verse 1 and 5 together, you get 6, as well as representing the twin souls in the number 2. At this time, they are in harmony and full consciousness and have the gift of expression and knowledge shown by the symbols of the serpent and the apples on this card. For we see that the divine female twin soul is in front of the tree and has access to this knowledge, and the expression of this knowledge is symbolized by the snake, because we see the snake referenced to speech and expression in both the Kabbalah Tree of Life and Scripture. On the Tree of Life, the throat chakra is located at the path of the serpent, and in Scripture, the serpent speaks to them about eating the divine fruit of knowledge in Genesis 3:5. For God doth know in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. 3 and 5 equals 8, the immortal soul. And the number 8 is also connected to the heart chakra. So now we understand that the serpent and tree of apples are symbolic for the expressed intellect of the female twin soul. However, the divine male twin soul has his divine knowledge represented by the tree with the 12 flames. The fires are representing his divinity illuminated within him, as they are at the height of consciousness and have full access to their divinity. However, in the background, we can see a steep mountain has been depicted. This is to denote that this will not be a continuous cycle of never-ending plains, but one of changes. The mountain is represented in a phallic way, as it is the male that will forget his divinity first and force Lilith from the garden as they once again descend in consciousness throughout this cycle. When consciousness leaves them and they forget their divinity, they are no longer welcome in the garden. And we see this in Genesis 3:24. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way of the tree of life. 2 and 4 equals 6, and 3 is the Trinity. The cherubim guarding the way of the tree of life is symbolic for man descending into lower consciousness, and our worthiness of divine knowledge leaves us and we are denied of it. As we saw previously on the Kabbalah Tree of Life, the number 6 Lover's card equates to the Sephirah number 6, called Tifereth. This Sephirah is connected to the heart chakra, and in the Hindu tradition, this is known as the Anahata chakra. Its symbol is often shown as a green lotus with 12 flower petals, and in the middle of the lotus is a hexagram, which also represents the number 6. This hexagram is symbolic for the upper ethereal forces and the lower energetic forces of the earthly plane merging within the heart. As discussed in previous videos, the energy point of the heart is the only energy center in our ethereal body that is anchored in both the physical and ethereal planes. This is where our lower 3 chakras and higher 3 chakras meet, and it is not surprising that the name of this chakra is equated to a sound known as the Anahata Nada, the unmade sound. This is a sound not made in the realms of where we dwell. It is the unknown sound of the universe, the primal sound of energy itself. Our ethereal heart is the merging point or vortex of the higher and lower realms. The Hindu called this hexagram within this chakra a Shatkona. It is a symbol used in Hindu yantra that represents the union of Purusha, the supreme being, symbolic of the ethereal and divine forces, and Prakriti, which is symbolic of Mother Nature and the causal matter influenced by the ethereal and upper realms. In Tibetan Buddhism, the heart wheel is circular, white, and has 8 petals or channels that reach downwards. It is said these channels divide into 3, the mind wheel, speech wheel, and body wheel. They then go to the 24 places in the body. They then divide into 3 again, and then into 1,000, producing 72,000 channels known as the nadi, which spread out throughout the whole body. It is interesting in these numbers from Tibetan Buddhism that we see a connection to the number 8. The channels from the heart are said to go into 24 places, 2 and 4 are 6, and if we divided 24 by the Trinity, we get 8. So we are seeing a connection to the number 6 and 8 once again. Therefore, it is not surprising that on the Kabbalah Tree of Life that the middle Sephirah, Tifereth, also represents the center where the upper and lower forces meet. Kabbalists say that Tifereth is somewhat of a converting Sephirah between form, Yesod, and the ethereal forces of Ketha. Tifereth is also related to the sun and the astrological sign of Leo, and in Christian Kabbalah, Tifereth is especially associated with Jesus, who they call God the Son, as opposed to Ketha, who is referred to as God the Father. They say this is because in Tifereth, the divine force sacrifices itself, transmuting into the forces of energy and matter in order that creation might come to be. They also say that it is this Sephirah where God becomes a mortal man. So what these Kabbalists are clearly showing is how they are relating these energies that are manifesting our creation from the projected mental universe, God consciousness, through the sun onto the material plane. And as
Hermetics shows us with the correspondence of the mental, spiritual and physical planes, there are no clearly defined boundaries and all the planes merge into one another. The heart is where your ethereal and foundational forces merge and you are anchored onto this plane. And the sun is the energetic connection that anchors the soul here by the heart, projected through God's mind. However, as the tree of life and Eastern philosophies show, you must pass into the ethereal heart and relinquish your bondage to the physical plane to move up into the ethereal and more conscious energy points within you. There is a Norse goddess known as Sin, and she was known as the one who guarded the gates and refused entry to those who were not deemed worthy. In chapter 35 of the Prose Edda book, Sin is listed as 11th of 16 Aesir. It is said that she guards the doors of the hall and shuts them against those who are not to enter. Her name is also connected to a saying where a denial, sin, is made when one says no. So we can see in the Norse mythology, it is the goddess Sin who guards the doors to the halls or path of Gimel. For it is when we work against the heart, we are creating sin or weight in our heart. And if we add the numbers of the chapter together, 3 and 5, it equals 8. In Sufism, the Qalb is called the heart of a mystic, which is caught between the downward pull of the lower nafs and the upward pull of the spirit of Allah, and thus can be blackened by sin. So once again, we see the heart connected to the area of upper and lower forces. This is the end of part 1 of number 7 in the Mystery Teachings series. The entire cornerstone of the ancient Egyptian belief system was related to the heart, and everything was focused on preparing for a time when the divine light would return and their hearts would be weighed against this light. The weighing of the heart ceremony was not a ritual enacted because their biological container had expired. They knew the truth of their divinity and their true ethereal forms, and as such prepared their souls and their heart for this coming light, not their physical bodies or their physical heart, which were only symbolic. The physical heart, like the pineal gland, are physical extensions of energy points within our ethereal bodies. Our ethereal body is who we are first and foremost. It is the form in which we were first created, and as such, it is with the ethereal body that we feel changes in vibrations or resonance first. These changes are then relayed to certain physical parts of our body that relate to these energy points. So for example, when sun gazing, you may feel a sensation behind your forehead, and your first thought is that it must be your pineal gland. However, what you are experiencing is your pineal gland reacting to a resonance from your third eye chakra, which is then being felt in the physical extension of that energy point. The correct way to perceive yourself is as an ethereal being, for this is who you are, and this is what the establishment have tried to hide from the masses, to keep them locked down into a physical perception of themselves. The establishment have even gone as far to create departments to program the reality of the masses into one of physicality, using agencies like science, which they then disguise as education, when in fact it is merely programming. Most people wouldn't know that the Big Bang Theory was postulated by a Catholic priest, and which establishment has so much to lose if humanity woke up to the fact they are ethereal and immortal, and they are only responsible to their own souls and God for their immortality. Do you think we would need crime control and government to live as decent beings upon this planet if that truth were known? I think not. So what this information is showing us is the truth of who we are, and that is ethereal beings with a physical extension. And we need not fear death of our physical extension, but instead pay attention to the cycle of death and resurrection of our souls. If we look to the Aramaic Bible in verse Matthew 10:28, "And you shall not be afraid of those who kill the body, that are not able to kill the soul. Rather be afraid of him who can destroy soul and body in Gehenna." In other translations, the religious institutions have equated Gehenna to hell. However, what this is speaking of is the soul being wiped from existence, as the ancient Egyptians believed happened if you were not carrying the weight of enough light within your heart. The love we have collected throughout our lifetimes is an energy that can be measured by the Creator. And when this divine light returns, we will be measured against the light of the Creator to see if we are worthy of our immortality. And we see this verse is number 10:28, which is reduced to 10:10, showing the infinite cycle of the twin souls. In this verse, from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they speak of the heart and truth leading them back to heaven and their godlike divinity. It states, "May the hearts of gods lead him in his exalted state into heaven among the gods who appear in visible forms. If any god or any goddess attack Osiris Ani, whose word is truth, when he setteth out, the ancestor of the year who liveth upon hearts, Osiris, shall eat him when cometh forth from Abydos. And the ancestors of Ra shall reckon with him, and the ancestors of light shall reckon with him." This is showing that those who live and speak in truth will once again experience a time when they walk as gods on this earth, and that those who do live in truth are protected and guided by the gods. However, although our paths are destined, we have free will to take a higher or lower path and see if we meet our tests through strength of character and heart, or whether we give in to the temptation of the lower path and remain in bondage to the physical plane. We see this lower path symbolized in the other card connected to the number 6 Lovers card, and that is the Devil card, which is card number 15. The Devil card is symbolic of our bondage to the physical plane, when we descend into lower consciousness. When we forget our divinity, we forget that we are ethereal, and instead only think of ourselves as finite and physical. This is why we see the chains around the necks of the divine twin souls, for they are trapped in the physical perception of themselves and a victim of the devil. In Daniel 5:20, it shows the heart is connected to his covenant in this verse, but it could not override his mind in lower consciousness. It states, "But when his heart was lifted up and his mind hardened in pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him." Showing that when the mind refused the heart, his divinity remained elusive to him. And we see that the number 5 is symbolic of the covenant, and 20 shows the connection to the divine, which measures his worthiness through his heart. We also see a connection to the heart and the sun with the ancient Maya, who willingly sacrificed their hearts to the sun. Once again, some people seem to be offended by this practice and look down on the Maya due to these rituals. But what they don't understand is that the Maya knew they were ethereal and that their soul would return again, so they did not fear death. These rituals were performed because they believed a time of higher consciousness could be brought back through the sacrificing of the heart. We also see in some of the cultures that pain and sacrifice are often a way to strengthen the heart of a warrior. When a person deals honorably with pain and sacrifice, this increases the light within their heart. In some Native American tribes, there was a ceremony known as the Sun Dance, and this was a ceremony only the bravest and most honorable warrior could partake in. This warrior was then hung on hooks to take the pain of the people in his village. They believed in doing this, he not only lightened his own heart, but their hearts too. And in Greek mythology, there is a story about a centaur named Chiron, and this story is also describing the strength of heart that comes through pain. Chiron embodies the compassion and humility pain can bring to a person, but in turn strengthens their heart also. This is why it takes strength of heart to return to the higher consciousness of an immortal soul. And we can see this depicted on the Strength card, which is card number 8, symbolic for immortality, where the woman has closed the lion's jaws with strength of heart and not violence. We can also see this relayed in the story of Daniel and the lion. Daniel 6:16. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spoke and said, Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. Daniel 6:20. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice to Daniel. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God, whom you serve continually, able to deliver you from the lions? Daniel 6:21. Then said Daniel to the king, O king, live forever. Daniel 6:22. My God has sent his angel and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocence was found in me, and also before you, O king, I have done no hurt. Daniel 6:23. Then the king, exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found on him, because he believed in his God. The verses here in Daniel 6 are showing that when Daniel believes in his divinity and is no longer trapped in the illusion of bondage to the physical body, in his darkest hour he is rewarded with the truth of his divinity and immortality. This is relayed to him by his angel, which is symbolic for his ethereal self. Therefore, the lions, knowing Daniel's understanding of his immortality, see no reason to kill him. This is what the Strength card number 8 is once again symbolic for. And on the Tree of Life, the Sephirah Hod number 8 is directly connected to the Strength card, and is said to be symbolic of, instead of conquering an obstacle in one's path, to rather overcome it by subduing oneself to the obstacle. And we see that the Sephiroth of the heart is connected to the Sephiroth of strength through the path of vision. This is symbolic in the way one perceives themselves. The story of Daniel shows that his trust in himself, of who he really was actually his trust in God, and he was rewarded as such for his courage with immortality. And finally, in Proverbs 10:20, we see that the heart weighted in sin is of little value compared to the soul that lives in truth. The tongue of the just is as choice silver. The heart of the wicked is little worth. Once again, 20 is connected to the heart, and 10 is symbolizing the covenant of the divine twin souls and the infinite cycle of the souls. So now we have an understanding for the divine twin souls in their physical form on the material plane through the Lover's card. So let us now look to the next card that is symbolic of our ethereal form and the ethereal realm, which is card number 7. When the spirit of man is unawakened, he cannot know the great self within him, of which he is a part, not knowing his true nature and unable to see clearly. He is blinded by material delusions. Would not the creatures of the night, which never see the sun, deem the moon to be the most brilliant light in the sky above? So it is with man walking in the darkness of spiritual unconsciousness. He says, I am body, and the body is my whole being. And in the delusion of that belief, he becomes ensnared in an existence bound to matter. Like the creatures bound to an existence in the night, which cannot know the glories of things flourishing in the brilliance of daylight, so it is with men bound to the darkness of spiritual ignorance. The above verse from the Colburn is explaining the spiritual ignorance of man who does not understand he is more than just his physical container, and that this flawed perception actually creates his reality, and he is trapped in bondage to the illusion of the material plane. The verse is also perfectly representing the next tarot card, number 7, the Chariot, and is symbolic of the ethereal form of the male and female twin souls and the ethereal plane. As we have discussed previously, our souls move between the material and ethereal plane during our incarnations on this realm. This ethereal plane is also relayed in the Greek mythology of Hades. Hades was not only a place where one could face a time of torment as a soul while awaiting their physical incarnation, but the mythology also tells there were levels within Hades where the good souls spend their time in a beautiful garden awaiting to be incarnated again. On the ethereal plane, we are closer to the divine, and as such, we have a full understanding of ourselves. However, we do not have the benefit of this understanding when we incarnate physically onto the material plane. So let us look further into the Chariot card and see what we can unlock within its symbolism to help us better understand the true extent of our potential and who we really are. The Chariot card is card number 7. The number 7 is relating to the 7 energy points or primary chakras within our ethereal form. It is also relating to the 7 gates, which are symbolic of the ascent from the root chakra, our first gate, back to reunite with God consciousness at the 7th gate, which equates to the crown chakra. If we look to the ancient Egyptian number key, we will see that the number 7 is also connected with the root chakra. This is again symbolic of the ascent of the soul back to God consciousness, which begins at the root chakra, the first gate. These 7 gates back to the divine can also be related to the Sumerian mythology of the goddess Inanna, who was symbolic for the divine female twin soul and her journey of sacrifice as she passes through each of the 7 gates of the underworld. The underworld being symbolic for the material plane, and each gate is depicting our ascent back to reunite with divine source. We see this theme repeated in Jacob's ladder, where there are 7 rungs on the ladder back to heaven. And according to the Jewish teachings, before the coming of the Messiah, the first angel representing the 70th year exile of Babylonia climbed up 70 rungs and then fell down. So again we see there is a connection to the path back to God and the number 7. This path back to God consciousness through these gates or levels is relayed in the verse Matthew 7:14. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. The number 7 is relating this to our ethereal self, and 1 and 4 equals 5, which is symbolic of our covenant with God. So let us see where the Chariot card falls on the Fibonacci sequence. And we see it is on the number 13 in the sequence, and number 13 is also positioned at the top of the ancient Egyptian number key, connected to the 3rd eye and crown chakra. 13 is also connected to the number 13 death card. However, this is not something to be feared, as it is representing the death of our physical container. For we must understand that we are ethereal beings in our truest form, for that is how we were first created from God consciousness. Therefore, symbolically, when we are incarnated on the material plane within our physical bodies, we are in death, unlike our ethereal self, which is immortal. We also see another connection to the physical within the number 13. For when we add 1 and 3, this equates to 4. And as we saw with the Emperor card, 4 represents foundation and the earth. So this is what the death card is symbolic for, the death of our physical containers on the material plane. However, the establishment have used the fear of death as a tool to control the masses, and they have ensured that the herd were not only programmed to fear physical death, but to also fear the number 13 and view it as evil, when in fact it is symbolic of the resurrection of our soul and life. When we look to the ancient Egyptian number key, the number 13 is related to the third eye and crown chakra. We can even view these two chakras as working together, as these energy points represent where our soul consciousness meets God consciousness. The crown chakra actually begins at the Ajna third eye chakra, which is connected to us physically at the pineal gland, and then permeates out into pure consciousness to sit above the head as a crown. This is why the crown chakra is sometimes shown at the third eye pineal gland area, as this is the point where our soul and our consciousness reunites with God. It is the gate through which we leave our physical containers, and it is actually referred to as the gateway in the Hindu tradition. On the Kabbalah tree of life, the third eye pineal gland is relating to Daleth, also called door, once again showing that it is at this point we reunite with divine source. We can also see this spoken of in scripture as meeting God face to face or eye to eye. And in this verse it is symbolic of the third eye pineal gland opening to see God face to face. But this is done through the heart first. Psalm 27:8. When thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. 2 and 7 equal 9, and is symbolic of the divine Trinity, the divine twin souls and God meeting face to face. And the number 8 is symbolic of the immortal soul and God's source, and is also connected to the heart on the ancient Egyptian number key. In the Hindu tradition, the crown chakra is called the Sahasrara and is the 7th primary chakra. So again, we have a connection to the number 7 chariot card and the crown chakra. The crown chakra is considered to be the chakra of pure God consciousness, and it is symbolized by a lotus with 1,000 multicolored petals. It is located either at the crown of the head or above the head. This chakra contains the white drop, or bodhicitta, a Sanskrit word meaning that which is conscious. In the ancient Hindu teachings, the crown chakra is represented by the color white and is connected to inner wisdom and the death of the body. In Tibetan Buddhism, the point at the crown of the head is represented by a white circle with 33 downward pointing petals. It is of primary importance in the performance of phawa, which means the projection of consciousness after death, or a transference of consciousness at the time of death, in order to obtain a rebirth in a pure land. So again, in both these different cultural teachings, we see that the death of the physical body is connected with this chakra, which is symbolically what the 13 Death Tarot card is also showing us. The pure land they are referring to is symbolic for a time on this realm at the beginning of the cycle, when all including Mother Earth are at the height of an illumination of divine consciousness. The ancient Egyptians called this Aru, the field of reeds. And this is the place all souls aspired to rebirth into, a new cycle of incarnations beginning with a golden age. The reuniting with God consciousness at this point is also depicted in the symbolism of the third eye chakra, where we see the sun and the moon shown on either side of the triangle. The triangle points downwards, representing ethereal and divine forces being brought down onto the physical plane. The sun is symbolic of the male twin soul, and the moon is representing the female twin soul. It is at this point the Trinity are reunited, and this is symbolically represented by the triangle over the large white circle in the middle. The seed syllable for this chakra is the syllable Om, and the presiding deity is Araharishvara, who is half male and half female, representing Shiva and Shakti. As we now understand from previous videos, Shiva and Shakti are symbolic of the divine male and female twin souls in their ethereal forms. In the ancient Hindu texts, it says in the repetitive cycle of the eons, Adaharishvara is ordained to reappear at the beginning of every creation as in the past. And Utpala, a 10th century Indian mystic, called this form the Lord whose half is the fair one. So we can see the divine twin souls and unification with God consciousness are being symbolically shown connected at this point. In Kwai Gong, a form of martial arts, the highest dantian is located at this position. This is known as one of the 3 furnaces that converts energy in the body. In this dantian, the spiritual Shen energy is converted into Wuji, the infinite space of void. This void, Wuji, is referring to the space in the vortex that connects our consciousness with the divine consciousness. And this is why we see that the heart and third eye pineal gland are connected. For as shown in the previous videos, the heart is the other vortex that also connects us to God. Finally, we see this connection to God consciousness, Orion, and the number 13, also shown in an unusual artifact found in Ecuador in the 1980s. The artifact was made of a very ancient black stone, and etched upon it were 13 levels of bricks leading up to an eye. When the artifact was put under a UVA light, these etchings illuminated. Even more interesting, on the bottom of the pyramid there were also symbols etched into it, as well as gold inlays representing Orion's belt. This conclusion of the inlays equating to Orion's belt is also shared by the well-respected researcher Klaus Donner. When the symbols on the bottom were translated by a German linguist, Kurt Schildmann, he said they were a very early pre-Sanskrit language, and what they translated to was the Son of the Creator comes. So now we have a clear representation in the artifact of the illumination of Orion and the divine twin souls represented by the sun, which also equates to Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And this illumination of the divine souls is an illumination of that part of the divine within us all. This is the end of part 1 of number 8 in the Mystery Teachings series. In part 2, we will look further into the information being unlocked within the symbols and numbers connected to the chariot card, an ancient Egyptian number key. We will also uncover a connection to the numbers and symbols related to these chakras and the esoteric knowledge of the Freemasons. So far, we have unlocked the numbers 7 and 13 from the Chariot Tarot card. We will again look to the Fibonacci sequence to see what other numbers can be decoded from the Tarot and the ancient Egyptian number key. If we add all the previous numbers in the Fibonacci sequence to this point in the sequence at 13, it gives us the number 33. 33 is a master number, and as such it stands alone symbolically. But there are also other layers to the symbolism within this number, and we can deduce it to a number 6. However, let's first look at the number 33 and what this number is telling us symbolically. The number 33 is symbolic of the twin souls, as each soul is a trinity and represented by 3. For each has a part of their twin soul within, as well as the divine. So even though every soul is part of this trinity, every soul is also a trinity. Like the number 13, the number 33 is situated at the third eye crown chakra on the ancient Egyptian number key. And as discussed before, this is symbolic for the gateway between the consciousness of the ethereal soul and divine consciousness. This is where we consciously access the ethereal plane outside of our physical container, but also where we reunite as the Divine Trinity when the light of Orion, our Creator, returns at the end of every cycle. However, as we have seen in the previous videos, it is through the illumination of the heart where this access through this gateway to the divine is granted. When we look at the symbolism of the Freemasons, we also see a connection to this information and the number 33. On one of the most important symbols of the Freemasons, depicting the highest degree you can reach within this secret organization, we see a double-headed eagle symbolizing the male and female twin souls rising to meet God consciousness and then being crowned with the 33 shown above at the third eye crown chakra. The double-headed eagle is also sometimes represented as the double-headed phoenix, and in this drawing by Jesuit priest Athanasius Kircher, he clearly shows the double-headed eagle is representing the male and female divine twin souls. The double-headed eagle is symbolic for their illumination and rising up like the phoenix from their physical form upon the light of Orion returning. The number 33 appears many times in scripture and is connected to Jesus and his crucifixion, which happened at the age of 33. This crucifixion of Jesus spoken of in scripture is symbolic of the death of the physical container when the divine male twin soul reunites with God consciousness at the end of the cycle of the soul. For just as we experience a cycle of death and resurrection on the material plane in our physical bodies, there is also a cycle of death and resurrection of our ethereal body in a larger cycle on the ethereal plane. And just as Jesus was crucified and resurrected, many people don't know that Mary also died and was resurrected 3 days later. This is known by the church as the Assumption of Mary. And when we look at the death and resurrection story of Mary, we see there is also a connection to the number 33. In Uruguay, there is a very holy and sacred Baroque carving of Mary, and it is called the Virgin of the 33. The Virgin of the 33 is a 36 centimeter high statue of the Assumption of the Virgin. The Assumption of Mary, like the crucifixion of Jesus, is symbolic for the death of the physical container of the divine female twin soul upon being reunited with God consciousness. So we have a direct connection to death, resurrection, and the number 33, shown to be repeatedly related to both the divine male and female twin souls, Jesus and Mary Magdalene. We also see this related in verse Exodus 33:3. Unto a land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people, lest I consume thee in the way. The land flowing with milk and honey is the pure land mentioned previously in the Tibetan Buddhism. Once again, this is relating to reuniting with God consciousness and being bestowed with the height of consciousness at the beginning of a cycle, when we are fully illuminated, hence flowing with milk and honey. Those who did not express themselves truthfully, however, as in stiff-necked, will not go up through the heart, through the third eye chakra, to the land flowing with milk and honey. Everything in this universe exists within cycles. We see this in the Hermetic principle of rhythm. This principle is even applied to the conscious manifestation of God's will onto creation, which also happens in cycles. At times within the cycle of God's conscious projection onto our reality, God mentally plays out the experience of himself in full glory, as he gets to cast his light upon this realm once again and illuminate his children. And this is where mythology and scripture are created. For if we look again at the Hermetic principle of correspondence, the law is as above, so below, as below, so above. However, what comes first is as above, so below. So this is showing that as above is symbolic for the divine influence that is reflected towards us, and we are then a reflection of this divine influence back onto itself and each other, as we all have a part of the divine within us. Now, if we mirror the 33 symbolically, we get the number 8. And as we saw in the previous video, 8 is related to the heart and immortality. And if we add the other number of the heart, 20, from the ancient Egyptian number key to the number 33, we get 53. 5 and 3 are 8. So now we also have another connection to the heart and third eye, pineal gland. If we look at the other encoded layers of information within the number 33, we see the number 6 is also present in this number. For when we add 3 and 3 together, we have 6. 6 is relating to the transmutation of the mental universe and consciousness into matter and creation onto the material plane. As we have seen in the previous videos, number 6, the Lover's card, is symbolic for the creation of the twin souls from God consciousness and the manifestation of their ethereal forms into their physical containers onto the material plane. In relation to the number 6, the Zohar states, "His 2 eyes were manifested, radiating with splendor, darting 2 beams of light which crossed with those of the reflection. The brow of God and his eyes formed a triangle in heaven, and its reflection formed a second triangle in the waters. So was revealed the number 6, being that of universal creation." So we see in the Zohar that the number 6 symbolizes universal creation. Matter manifests from the mental universe, which is reflected below onto the waters, which is symbolic for ether, and why we see the symbol of Aquarius pouring forth the water. The water is symbolic of the ether, and hence the age of Aquarius is also known as the age of ether. It is upon the ether that the conscious thought of God is manifest into the material, and at certain times in the cycle, this ether returns and the divine light illuminates once again. We also see water depicted on the Chariot card, symbolic for the waters of the ether. Number 6 is also represented in the hexagram, which is connected to the heart chakra. The hexagram at the heart chakra shows that the heart has both the upper and lower forces within this energy point, and these merging forces manifest the material creation into material form onto the physical plane. As we have previously discussed, the number 6 Lover's card is symbolic of the twin souls' physical form on the material plane. And now we have the number 7 Chariot card, which is symbolic for the ethereal form of the twin souls. At the bottom of the card, the 2 sphinxes represent the ethereal forms of the twin souls. The male is on the left and the female is on the right. We see that they are mirrored in position to the previous Lover's card, again showing a connection between the physical and ethereal forms of each soul. The 16 white stripes on the headdress is also a symbolic connection to the ethereal form of the twin souls, as 1 and 6 equals 7. However, the black and white stripes are also symbolic for a part of each twin soul within the other, and we also see this related in another black and white symbol that represents the twin souls, and that is the yin-yang. We see in yin-yang there is a part of each within the other, and the 2 parts make up the whole. And even more confirmation of this connection to the yin-yang symbol and the soul can be also found in these unusual ancient Japanese formations called kufan. Within these kufan, they discovered unusual carved jadeite artifacts known as magatama. Establishment archaeologists are unsure of what they represent. However, if we look to the word tama, its original meaning in Japanese was soul, as in tamashi, the Japanese word for soul or spirit. In between the 2 sphinxes representing the male and female twin souls, there is a shield with a golden orb and wings situated on the top. This shield is symbolic for our ethereal heart, and the winged disc is symbolic for the third eye, pineal gland. And we see the winged disc represented across culture, depicting the ethereal and conscious connection to the divine at this point within our ethereal and physical body. Both the ethereal heart and third eye chakra points within our ethereal body are our connections to God consciousness and the upper ethereal planes of Ein Sof. And as we saw in the last video, this is what the hexagram on the heart chakra is symbolizing: the merging of upper and lower forces to create a vortex. The shield and heart are also mentioned in scripture in verse Psalm 28:7. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusted in him, and I am helped. Therefore my heart greatly rejoiceth. With my song will I praise him. 2 and 8 equates to 10, symbolic of the covenant and infinite cycle of the souls. And the number 7, as we know, equates to the ethereal form. However, we also see this vortex symbolism repeated again on the front of the shield, depicted as a spinning top. And this is also symbolic of the vortex located not only at the heart chakra, but also at the third eye, symbolized by the winged disc located on top of the shield. This symbolic spinning top is also featured in Judaism and is called a dreidel. In the next video, we will look into the symbolism of the dreidel and its connection to our heart, consciousness, and Orion. As we saw in the last video, on the chariot card we see the symbol of a spinning top depicted on the shield between the sphinxes representing the male and female twin souls. This spinning top is representing the vortex created by the upper and lower energetic forces merging in the middle at the ethereal heart. The winged disc on top of the shield is representing our conscious connection to the divine, transmuted through the sun, also connected to the third eye vortex, and the wings are representing the ethereal. The spinning top is also featured in Judaism as an important symbol connected to the 8-day festival of lights. This spinning top is called a dreidel and has letter symbols inscribed on 4 sides: Nun, Gimel, Hey, and Shin. These symbols are depicting the energetic and ethereal connection within each soul to God consciousness. Each letter symbolically interlocks with the other, and together they create the ethereal vortex between the souls and God. In the electric universe model, they have proven that the sun could actually be powered externally, and in 1972, Ralph Jurgens wrote, "The known characteristics of the interplanetary medium suggest not only that the sun and the planets are electrically charged, but that the sun itself is the focus of a cosmic electric discharge, the probable source of all its radiant energy." Researcher and electrical engineer Eric Dollard posits that not only is the sun powered externally, but in the middle it contains a black hole. So it seems alternative modern scientists that have had the courage to move outside of the confines of establishment science are now confirming what Hermetics and the ancients already knew thousands of years ago. The universe is electric, and so are we. So let us look in more detail to the symbols on the dreidel. First we have Nun. Nun is connected to the Hebrew word for snake, and snake in Aramaic is Nun. Nun is also one of the 7 letters which receive a special crown when relaying the Torah. And let us not forget, the Torah in its truest form is symbolic for the words of God. So we see that within this word and symbol Nun, we have a connection to the snake and wisdom. This connection can also be found with the snake relaying divine wisdom to Eve in the Garden of Eden, which is also symbolically depicted on the lover's card. In ancient Egypt, the serpent goddess Wadjet was symbolic for knowledge, and she was known as having the all-seeing eye of wisdom. In Gnosticism, the serpent was connected to wisdom and was said to be the embodiment of wisdom transmitted to Sophia. Therefore, Nun is referring to the divine wisdom being relayed from the divine male soul through the female intellect. The next letter symbol on the dreidel is Gimel, and as we have covered the path of Gimel in the previous videos, we now understand that this symbol is showing the path and connection between the ethereal heart and the third eye. This is also the path that connects these 2 points and shows we do not open the third eye and meet God until we have opened our heart. This means living as a soul aligned with truth, Only then does the heart actuate the path to the third eye, pineal gland, and the soul moves beyond Daleth, the door, and the physical body is shed. This is represented in the number 13, which is the number for the path of Gimel. Next we have the symbol of Hay, which is comprised of a Daleth and a Yud. So here is where we see the connection of Daleth, which equates to the third eye, pineal gland, and Gimel. The Yud represents God, therefore Hay represents when the Daleth and the Yud meet through the correct thought, speech, and action, as Hay is also connected to these three actions. Hay is also the name God is referred to when his true name is not spoken. So we are seeing the gateway to the crown or God consciousness represented in this symbol for Hay, and the Kabbalah states that the Daleth and the Yud only meet through correct thought, speech, and action. So again, we see that it is with these attributes of the aligned soul that one gains access through Daleth, the door. And finally, we have Shin. Shin is symbolic for the fire and life force that emanates from the spiritual heart and mind of divine consciousness within Orion. For within this manifested consciousness of the Creator, the heart and mind are united into one. It is written in the Zohar that the eyes of the head and the most holy ancient one are two in one, equal, whichever watch and sleep not. In Kabbalah, the three lines of the Shin are also interpreted as intellect, emotion, and Kesser, which is related to will. When the Shin is represented as Kesser, symbolic for will or mental projection, it states that 620 rays of light are imparted to the world through the three channels of the Shin. However, these three lines of Shin are also symbolic for the Trinity, as Kabbalists use the letter Shin to signify the Trinity of the first three Sephiroth on the Tree of Life: Kether, Chokmah, and Binah. So we can see Shin is connected to the Sephiroth Kether, symbolic of God consciousness within Orion, and the twin souls are represented by Chokmah and Binah. Therefore, Shin encompasses all the conscious and emotional aspects of God as well as the Trinity. So it is clear that the dreidel is much more than just a simplistic spinning top, but is in fact a very profound object with hidden knowledge locked within the symbolism. The dreidel and the spinning top on the shield are referring to the connection between the heart and consciousness of our souls and the heart and consciousness of the divine. It is also symbolic for the ethereal, energetic, and emotional processes involved in this connection, for it is through correct thought, speech, and action that we reach our full potential and divinity. The chariot driver, like the angel on the Lover's card, and also the Hierophant and the Justice card, are all symbolic of the intermediate consciousness between the soul and the divine. Each aspect of this intermediate consciousness has a different role and process in the evolution and ascent of the soul back to God consciousness. The chariot aspect to the third consciousness is one of the divine force that guides the twin souls upon their destined path. We see upon his belt that there are 5 notches. This is symbolic for the covenant the soul has with the divine, as we saw the number 5 Hierophant card represented. The castles in the background are symbolic for the kingdom of heaven, and we see they are positioned behind the curtain that depicts the ethereal plane where the Creator resides. The keys to the kingdom of heaven are bestowed through knowledge. This knowledge is the understanding of the truth about ourselves, and in doing so we unlock the shackles that bind us to the material plane. Those who seek and discover this truth will know this kingdom. For as this ancient Egyptian proverb tells us, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and whoever shall know thyself shall find it. The chariot driver displays a square on his chest at the heart under a 6-pointed star. The square is symbolic of the root chakra, and within the symbolism for the root chakra, which is also known as the Muladhara, there is a square. And when we add the sides of the square and the triangle within it together, we get the number 7. As mentioned previously, the root chakra is connected to the number 7 on the ancient Egyptian number key and represents the first gate back to God consciousness. The 6-pointed star above the square is representing the hexagram, and as discussed previously is symbolic of the consciousness of the Creator manifest into matter. There are two crescents on the driver's shoulders. These are also symbolic for the ethereal realm, as the moon is the ruler of the ethereal, just as the sun rules the physical plane. Within each of the crescents, there is a face-in profile, one dark and the other light. This is symbolic of the ethereal forces of energy in the polarity of positive and negative. This polarity of energetic forces is also symbolized within the pillars Joachim and Boaz on the High Priestess card. The light and dark faces are also relating to the male and female twin soul and line up with a corresponding Sphinx. Upon the head of the chariot driver is a crown with an 8-pointed star, symbolic of the immortal soul and also a connection to God's source at the third eye. If we include the 5 spikes upon his crown, this gives us the number 13. And now we have another connection to the number 13 and the crown chakra. The curtain behind the chariot driver is symbolic of the veil between the physical and ethereal planes. But unlike the single curtain on the High Priestess and Justice card, there is another set of curtains symbolizing the different levels within the ethereal plane. As we have discussed in previous videos, there exists an ethereal plane and physical plane which our souls move between throughout our incarnations. However, there are many layers within this ethereal plane, and each plane becomes more refined as the ascent through these planes nears God consciousness. In Kabbalah, these different levels are called Ein, the vacuum of pure spirit, Ein Sof, the limitless and boundless, and Ein Sof Ura, the limitless light. These levels can also be related to the density of matter as it transmutes from the mental creation of God consciousness to be eventually manifest onto the physical plane as matter. On the Kabbalah tree of life, the ethereal body equating to the chariot card is symbolized in the tetrahedron, encompassing the Trinity at the bottom of the tree. Christians refer to this tetrahedron symbol as the shield of the Trinity, and it can be found throughout their religious art symbolism. On the Kabbalah tree of life, this bottom tetrahedron is relating to each twin soul that is manifest from Ketha as the Trinity and is now in an ascent back up through the 7 gates to God consciousness to be crowned at Ketha. The Kabbalah tetrahedron is also a number 7, for if we add all the parts in the Sephirot together, we get 34. 3 and 4 equate to 7. We can also see that all the parts of the soul as the Trinity are represented in each of the Sephirot on the tetrahedron. Sephirot number 8, Hod, represents the male and is directly connected to the Sephirot Gevurah. Hod is ruled by Mercury, the Roman god of wisdom, messages, communication, and prophecy. He was also a guide for souls to the underworld, so we see a connection to the ethereal here too. Mercury is also directly related to Hermes, and they are both symbolically depicted with winged heels and the caduceus. The number 7 Sephirot, Netzach, is directly connected to the Sephirot Chesed and related to the female twin soul. This Sephirot is ruled by Venus, the goddess who encompassed all the feminine attributes of love, beauty, sex, and fertility. In Greek mythology, she was known as Aphrodite, who was also connected to the dove and pomegranate. It was said Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was seduced by Hermes with the help of Zeus. So in mythology, we see the connection between the ruling planets of these two Sephirot representing the twin souls and Zeus representing Orion and God consciousness. The bottom Sephirot is number 10, Malkuth, and is ruled by the Sun Cross. It is said Malkuth encompasses the divine source present in both heaven and earth. Unlike the other 9 Sephirot, Malkuth is an attribute of God which does not emanate from God directly, rather it emanates from God's creation, when that creation reflects and expresses God's glory from within itself. This is speaking of the divine light carried within the souls. When relating this Sephirot to the Christian shield of the Trinity, it is known as the Spiritus Sanctus, or in other words, the Holy Spirit. In the middle of Hod, Netzach, and Malkuth is number 9, Yesod, symbolic for the Divine Trinity. In Christian Kabbalah, they say Yesod is the translating of spiritual concepts into actions that unite us with God. Yesod is also ruled by the moon, for the moon represents the ethereal and the creation forces of the female. On the shield of the Trinity, Christians refer to this part of the shield as the third person of the Holy Trinity, for it is connected to the Holy Spirit and is said to be responsible for the powers of communication and being the symbol of human to God union. The Holy Spirit is responsible for enacting the contact with Abraham and God, and in Christian Kabbalah, Yesod is known as the symbol for the covenant between Abraham and God and their pact. So we can see the connection between Malkuth, the Holy Spirit, and Yesod, the Divine Trinity, and the reunification of the souls with the divine. The path of Tau connects the infinite cycle of the 10 to the divine number of 9. Tau is like the Ankh and is symbolic for our connection to the divine that we each have within us. It is the undefinable spark that illuminates the divinity within us when the light of Orion returns. This illumination of the Christ within us is also symbolized by Jesus being crucified on the path of Tau in this first attested version of the shield of the Trinity. Psalms 82:5 says, "They know not, neither will they understand. They walk on in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are out of course." Psalms 82:6, "I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High." The next video, we will look at the twin souls' illumination and descent back to God consciousness. Just as the number 7 was symbolic of the ethereal forms of the twin souls, so is this next card in the sequence, which is card number 8, Strength. The Strength card is symbolic of the immortal soul, and it is showing that the immortality of the soul comes through not allowing the physical aspects of ourselves, symbolized by the lion, to dominate our true self. So we must use our internal fortitude and strength of spirit to conquer our bondage to the physical. When we have conquered our mental enslavement to the physical plane, our true power is found. This power comes from the understanding of who we really are. For when we know inherently that we are ethereal and immortal, we have no fear of death. But this immortality does not come to those who are not worthy of it. This is why the soul is shown in a white gown. This is symbolic of the pure intent in one's heart and also shows our connection to our divinity. The soul is shown gently closing the mouth of the lion, but the lion is also showing subservience. This is because he knows the soul is immortal. And we see this relayed in Daniel and the lions, as we have discussed in the previous videos. The lions did not kill Daniel, for his painful tests brought with it the knowledge of himself. And upon that understanding, he no longer feared death. The lions, then sensing Daniel did not fear death, saw no reason to kill him. However, Daniel's knowledge of himself and his immortality were only granted through his open heart and belief in himself. The number 8 on the Strength card is showing our immortality is connected to the heart chakra, as we see that the number 8 equates to the heart chakra on the ancient Egyptian number key. The soul on the Strength card is shown in white, and the infinity symbol of immortality above the head. This is symbolic of immortality that is found through the pure heart. We can also see the number 8 connected to immortality in the Chinese mythology of the 8 immortals. The 8 immortals are a group of legendary immortals, each with a power that can be transferred to a power tool that can bestow life or destroy evil. The 6 flowers and the wreath show the connection to the physical form, and the wreath is symbolic in Greek mythology for victory, strength, and wisdom. Again, this is showing that it's through these attributes of the aligned soul that one gains immortality and the power to consciously unshackle from the material ties that bind the soul to the physical world. When we look at the wreath on the head of the soul, we see 3 roses, symbolic for the Trinity within the soul. The rose is symbolically connected to a number of goddesses, including Isis, whose rose appears in the Metamorphosis of Apuleius, the only Latin novel to survive in its entirety, where she is said to be the sweet rose of reason and virtue. The mountain in the background is symbolic for the challenges the soul will face. These challenges will require inner strength and fortitude to move beyond. Card number 17, the star, is also equated to this card, as 1 and 7 equate to 8. The star is symbolic of the immortality of the ethereal soul, and we see the potential of the soul is also shown in this card, with the ether being poured upon the earthly plane, illuminating the divine within each soul. On this card, the ethereal soul is symbolized by the 7 white stars, and the immortality of the soul is relating to the 8-pointed star. If we look to the Fibonacci sequence, we see the strength card equates to the golden mean section of 21. And on the ancient Egyptian number key, this number equates to the solar plexus navel chakra, as well as Isis and the moon. And we can also see this connection to Isis and the moon shown in one of her other aspects, which is represented by the goddess Hathor, who is symbolic for the creation forces of the moon and also childbirth. The number 21 is symbolic for the twin souls and the divine, represented in the ethereal. This is showing they are not yet reunited as the Trinity. However, we see the potential of this reunification of the twin souls and the divine represented when we deduce the number 21 to a 3, which gives us the Trinity. As stated before, however, the number 21 is represented at this chakra, showing us symbolically that the twin souls and God consciousness have not yet reunited. If we times 3 by 7, this equates to 21. So now we have the 3 ethereal forms of the Trinity also symbolized in this number 2. And 21 is also used 7 times in the Bible. 21 is also the sum of the first 6 natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, making it a triangular number. The number 6 being symbolic of the manifesting of God consciousness and the mental into the material. 21 grams was also said to be the weight of the soul, according to Dr. Duncan McDougall, an early 20th century physician who measured the mass lost by a human body when the soul departed the physical body upon death. Given that this energy point related to 21 is where the soul enters the physical container, we are now able to understand the significance of Dr. McDougall's findings. It is also interesting to note that Russian scientist Konstantin Korotkov used an advanced technique of Kirlian photography and captured the life force leaving the body while photographing a person at the moment of his death with a bioelectric camera. It shows in blue the life force of the person leaving the body gradually. According to Korotkov, it is the navel and head that are the first to lose their life force, which would be the soul, and the groin and the heart are the last areas. So we also see in Korotkov's findings that it is the navel and head area where the life force or soul areas are located. As we now understand, it is the ethereal energy point at the heart chakra where the upper and lower forces merge to create the material from the conscious projection of the Creator. It is the ethereal energy point of the navel chakra, however, where our soul enters into our physical container. As mentioned in previous videos, according to Edgar Cayce, the soul was located near the stomach in an area he called the Leiden. And on the tomb of Neb-Neteru, the great high priest of ancient Egypt, it is inscribed with the verse, "The West seeks to hide from him who follows his heart. The heart is a god, the stomach is its shrine." And within the Taoist tradition, the psoas muscle, located in the stomach area, is spoken of as the seat or muscle of the soul and surrounds the lower dantian, one of three furnaces of energy within the ethereal body. In chapter 8, verse 21 of the Gospel of Mary, it relays this about the soul. The soul answered and said, "What binds me has been slain, and what turns me about has been overcome." Once again, we see that it is when we overcome the chains that bind us to the physical, we will understand our true self and the key to our immortality. There is much conjecture amongst many researchers regarding the location of the soul. Some say it is the heart. The Kabbalists say it is contained within the blood along the spine, and yet others state it resides at the third eye, pineal gland. In truth, all are correct, for as the ancient Egyptians knew, there was more than one part to our soul, and that there were different elements to our ethereal form. The conscious element of our soul that directs our will and expresses the individual essence of who we are is located at the third eye area and is called the Ba. This is the point where our ethereal self takes in information visually and consciously, and also where information is consciously processed before it is expressed. The aspect of the soul that is located in the stomach area equates to the Ka, and is where we process environmental information we cannot visually access, hence the term gut feeling. The ancient Egyptians said this was the part of the soul which distinguished the difference between a living and a dead person, with death occurring when the Ka left the body. Meskehenet was the goddess of the force responsible for the Ka entering into the body, and she was paired with the god Shai, who was known as the god of fate. It was said that he determined the span of each man's life and was present at the judgment of the soul when the heart is weighed. The Ka part of the soul was often represented symbolically as a second image or the double of the king. This double was representing his ethereal form. Between the Ba and the Ka aspects of the soul is the ethereal heart. This is the energy point of the ethereal body that emotionally processes and responds to information from both the Ka and Ba. In ancient Egypt, the soul and ethereal body was symbolized by the bird and wings. And we also see a connection to the bird and the soul in this verse from the Quran. The body is the cage of the bird of soul, which is imprisoned in it. Death is its escape from the cage, its freedom. Now, if we add the sum of all the previous numbers in the Fibonacci sequence together, we get the number 54, which can also be deduced to a 9, as 5 and 4 equal 9. So let us first look at what we can find in connection to the number 54. Firstly, we see a direct connection to the number 54 and the moon in relation to a particular cycle between the moon and the sun that was measured by the ancient Greeks, who called this cycle of 54 years a exiligmos, which translates to turning of the wheel. And within this cycle are 3 Saros cycles of eclipses of the sun and moon. So we also see the number 3 is significant within this 54-year cycle and is also connected to the navel chakra on the ancient Egyptian number key. Now if we add the number 20 connected to the heart on the ancient Egyptian number key and the number 54 together, we get 74, which deduces to an 11. This equates to the Justice card and once again shows that it is the heart and the alignment of one's soul that allows each gate to be transcended. The Torah is also separated into 54 parts, and there is a 54-day rosary novena connected to Mary, or Our Lady of Pompeii, as she is also known. And there is a Greek verse relating to the rosary that says, Theotokos, God-bearing maid, rejoice, grace-filled Mary, the Lord with thee, praised thou among women, and praised thy fruit of thy womb, because it was the Saviour of our souls that thou bearest. This verse is relaying that the fruit of the womb is not just physical, but also the soul. And it is also relating to the female creation energy responsible for birthing both the male and female souls onto the physical plane. This is why in times of higher consciousness, when we have a full understanding of ourselves and our roles of gender, we can honour each other for the complementary attributes and traits we have within each of us, and we exist harmoniously, benefiting from this understanding. However, unfortunately, there is an agenda to make us feel we need to be more like the opposite gender to find success as a spiritual being. This is purposely designed to keep us unaware of who we really are and in competition. Many have been led to believe gender is equated to left-right brain hemispheres, and again, this is completely unsupported in any ancient texts. And the latest findings from a study done by researcher Jeff Anderson and his colleagues of the University of Utah studied 1,000 participants, and none showed a particular side of the brain was being used more than the other, regardless of gender. The truth is, we are different for a reason, and this is because we complement each other on every level, physically, spiritually, and also mentally. These complementary differences within the gender make up the perfection of the whole. God did not make us flawed and in need of achieving some impossible task to achieve perfection. Perfection is achieved by honouring ourselves completely for who we are, and also honouring and respecting this in each other. Psalm 143:8. Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. Cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, for I lift up my soul unto thee. In the Hindu tradition, the chakra for the navel energy point is called the Manipura, also known as the City of Jewels. It is the third primary chakra, and so now we have a connection to the navel chakra and the ancient Egyptian number key, also revealed within the Hindu tradition. The number 3 is also represented in the triangle within the symbol relating to this chakra, and it is said that the three-eyed god Rudra resides in the Bindu within this chakra. The Manipura is located in the area of the solar plexus, navel, and digestive system. This is known as the fiery third chakra and the resplendent gem. This is also where Taoists say our chi power emanates from. The fire region is represented by the god Vani, who is shining red, has 4 arms, holds a rosary and a spear. The seed mantra for this chakra is the syllable Ram. With both Rudra and Vani, we see a connection to the number 4 Emperor card, which, as we have seen in previous videos, features the symbolism of the ram's head and is symbolic for the physical attributes of the divine male twin soul. Rudra's consort or Shakti is Lakini, who has 3 faces, each with 3 eyes. One of her 4 arms holds a thunderbolt. It is said the arrow shot from the bow is of karma or fate. We not only see a connection to the number 3 in Lakini, but also to the number 9, as the 3 faces each have 3 eyes. When we added the sum of all the previous numbers in the Fibonacci sequence, we got the number 54. But now, if we deduce 5 and 4, we have the number 9. The number 9 is representing the Divine Trinity, but as this is a number deduced from another, it is still only a potential and not yet symbolic of the divine union. It is also not just a connection to the number 9 and the navel chakra that we see with Lakini and the ancient Egyptian number key, but also this is shown to us encoded in the Kabbalah tree of life. If we look to the Kabbalah tree of life, we see a direct connection to the number 9 Seraphot, Yod, and the moon. However, when we look to the path of mouth, which equates to the navel chakra, we see that it is the path number 27. 2 and 7 are 9. And on the strength card, the mouth is also symbolically represented with the lion's mouth being gently closed. Number 9 and the moon can also be seen directly connected in the tarot, for the moon card is number 18, and 1 and 8 are 9. The moon card represents the ethereal plane and the hidden forces of the universe that work within this plane and the effect that they have on us. We can see the ether represented in the water, and the crayfish carries the same symbolic meaning as the crab. And when we look at the sign of Cancer, which is related to the crab, we can see it is ruled by the moon. The crab and crayfish are symbolic for the cycles that are connected to the moon and how they relate emotionally within our instinctive nature. This is symbolized by the dogs representing the male and female twin souls and the primal and instinctive emotions that influence them. The two towers again represent the different planes between the physical and ethereal, and we see the physical represented in the number of gold leaves, as 15 when deduced equates to 6. Behind the crescent moon we see the sun is represented, and this is why the navel chakra is also called the solar plexus, due to the connection between the heart chakra and sun and the navel chakra and the moon. This connection between these two energy points can be seen on the ancient Egyptian number key as well as the Kabbalah tree of life through the path of Semke, which is path number 25 and deduces to a 7. The root meaning of the word Semke means to uphold or support, and it is the 15th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is deduced to a 6. So we can see both the physical and ethereal being represented in this path. On the Kabbalah tree of life, the path of mouth is called the path of Pei, and this path is directly related to the navel chakra. Pei is the 17th Hebrew letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Pei is also symbolic of the expression of the soul when it is represented as the tetrahedron. So now we have a connection to the number 8 strength card and the navel chakra on the tree of life in the path of Pei, as 1 and 7 are 8. Pei also has a numerical value of 80. The path of Pei also connects the Sephirot, Hod and Netzach, related to the male and female twin souls within the tetrahedron. And if we multiply the numbers of these Sephirot 7 and 8, we get 56, which deduces to an 11. So now we have another connection to the number 11 and the Justice card connected to the navel chakra. As we saw in the previous videos, the tetrahedron is symbolic for the Trinity and also the ethereal soul. So we are seeing the creation of the soul also represented in this connection between the two Sephiroth through Pei. The number 9 is also found when we multiply the two Sephiroth representing the male and female twin souls and the middle Sephiroth, Yod, representing God. 7 multiplied by 9 equals 63, and 6 and 3 are 9. 8 multiplied by 9 is 72, and 7 and 2 are 9. This is showing the potential of divine reunion exists within each soul. Proverbs 11:30. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that wins souls is wise. We are now on the last card in the tarot key that equates to the ethereal and physical form of the twin souls. And this card is number 9, the Hermit. And just as the third eye and crown chakra are connected together at the top of the ancient Egyptian number key, so are the sacrum and root chakras connected at the bottom of this key. Many may wonder why such an ordinary card with little symbolism such as the Hermit card can be attributed to such an important and divine number as 9. However, that lack of symbolism and simplicity is in itself symbolic of what this card is revealing. For the Hermit card is showing that the attainment of the Divine Trinity is an inner and individual journey. The soul is now at the bottom gate, ready to make the ascent back to the top, to be returned to perfect wholeness and be crowned with Christ consciousness. However, this journey of each soul must come through walking the inner path and moving beyond each gate by conquering the shadows that keep us bound to the material plane. A soul conquers these shadows of his dark, unconscious nature by having an understanding of himself. And this is done through knowledge seeking and wisdom. Ecclesiastes 7:12. For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense. But the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. Proverbs 4:7. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. The lantern he holds in front of him illuminates his path, and it is symbolic also for the illumination within his own heart. For we see that within the lantern there is a six-pointed star representing the hexagram. And as we have seen in the previous videos, the hexagram is symbolic for the upper and lower forces meeting at the ethereal heart. We can see the star also aligns with the hermit's heart, and his hand is held above, aligned with the third eye. For as we now know, the truth of ourselves will be revealed to us through the heart and mind working in harmony. So now let us see where the Hermit card is connected on the golden mean section. And we see that this is at the number 34. As previously mentioned, this equates to both the sacrum and root chakra on the ancient Egyptian number key. And when we deduce 34, we get 7. So now we have a symbolic connection to the 7 gates that the hermit must traverse to be crowned at the 7th gate as the Divine Trinity. These gates are also known as the 7 heavens, and this is found in many major traditions and mythologies, such as Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Christianity, as well as in Hermeticism and Gnosticism. And in Abrahamic religions, the throne of God is said to be above the 7th heaven, and this again equates with the crown chakra and Ketha on the Kabbalah tree of life. In the Quran it states, "See you not how Allah has created the 7 heavens, one above the other, and made the moon a light in their midst, and made the sun a lamp?" This verse is relating to the 7 inner gates to God, and also symbolically represents the male and female twin souls in the sun and the moon. The Hindu tradition also has the concept of 7 heavens, and the 7th heaven is known as Brahmapura, and it is said to be the abode of the god Brahma. The 7 gates are not just representing the ascent back to the divine within us, but also the 7 primary energetic points of the ethereal body. Luke 13:24. Strive to enter in at the strait gate, for many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in, and shall not be able. However, let us look again at the number 34. It is obvious our ancient ancestors knew the importance of this number, and 34 had a significant role in their astronomical calculations. In the prehistoric temples of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, one of the most famous of these temples is the Casa Rinconada. This temple is circular and has 34 masonry vaults corresponding to an astronomical cycle of 34 days. There are also some very interesting quotes in regards to this number from some notable representatives within the religious establishments. In a vision, Brother Joseph Francis tells that one day he saw the crowning of the thorn of our Lord during his passion. By 3 times one had removed and replanted the crown, and each time thorns penetrated in his head, leaving 34 deep wounds. Another is from the priest Padre Pio, who said about himself, "I am a priest who prays." One day he answered to his superior, who asked him how many rosaries he had recited each day. "Bah, to my superior, I have to tell the truth. I recited 34 of it." And Dante, who many considered as being a great initiate, devoted 33 songs of his Divine Comedy to the Purgatory, 33 to the sky, and 34 to hell. What Dante relayed here is very significant, as we now understand that 33 is related to the crown chakra at the top gate, and 34 to the root chakra at the bottom gate. And Dante had strong connections within the religious institutions, especially Pope Boniface. So therefore, it is not hard to imagine he had access to secret knowledge. However, there are yet other numbers encoded within the number 9 Hermit card. For if we look at the Fibonacci sequence, once again and add the sum of all the previous numbers to this point, we get the number 88. 88 is a very important number symbolically, for this is relating to the male and female twin souls. Each 8 is symbolic of the immortal soul that is to make the ascent through the 7 gates back to God and the divinity within themselves. And when we deduce 88, we get 16, and 1 and 6 are 7. So again we see the ethereal body and 7 gates encoded within this number. In Mandarin, 88 translates to Ba Ba, and it is also interesting to note that the ancient Egyptians called the soul Ba Tu. 88 is also the time it takes Mercury to orbit the Sun, and we see the connection to Mercury and Hod in the tetrahedron representing the soul on the bottom of the Kabbalah tree of life. We see the number 7 and 8 also being interrelated symbolically in number 17, the Star Tarot card. This card equates to an 8. However, when we look at the stars depicted on this card, there are 7 8-pointed white stars. And if we include the yellow 8-pointed star in the middle, symbolic of the divine, we now have 8 stars with 8 points. And so we also have the number 88 symbolically represented within this card. On the Kabbalah tree of life, the number 9 hermit card is equated to Malkuth. However, both the root and sacrum energy points are the energetic forces relating to the earthly connection of our ethereal body. In the previous videos, we have already seen the attributes within Malkuth that relate to the tetrahedron representing the Trinity within each soul. Now we will look into the other foundational attributes of Malkuth in relation to the ascent back up the 7 gates to Kether. For one must understand that the Kabbalah tree of life encompasses many different levels of information, all relating to the soul, not only in the physical and ethereal, but also the soul's creation and ascent back to be reunited with the divine. The Sephirot Malkuth sits at the bottom of the tree at the first gate and is connected to the root chakra. In Hermetic and Christian Kabbalah, Malkuth is known as kingdom and is associated with the realm of matter and earth relating to the physical world we exist within. This is the kingdom that emanates from the divine source to be manifest in the material, but is also reflected back up to the source in an infinite cause and effect relationship. As above, so below is reflected into the infinity. This is also shown in the number 10, the number of Malkuth, as 10 is an infinite number when divided by the Trinity. The Kabbalah tree of life is not only representing the soul at the bottom in the tetrahedron, but also the ascent of the soul back through the 7 gates, also depicted on the tree of life at the 7 chakra points. If we add the sum of all the Sephiroth and paths representing the chakra points, when we get to the third eye chakra, this equates to 85. And if you add 3 for the Trinity, you get 88. Malkuth is also associated with the world of Asaya, the material plane, and the lowest of the 4 worlds of Kabbalah. These 4 worlds are speaking of the 4 elements of earth also represented in Malkuth: wind, fire, water, and earth. We also see the number 4 is related to the root chakra and foundation, as we have seen in the number 4 Emperor card. The tarot card number 19, the Sun, which is symbolic for the material and purifying of the soul, is also showing this connection to Malkuth, as both 10 and 19 are deduced to a 1. This shows that Malkuth and the Sun are a direct emanation of the 1, which represents Kether or God. On the ancient Egyptian number key, the root chakra is located just above the ankle. Unfortunately, there has been an agenda to keep hidden the correct positioning of this energy point, as without the correct placement of this chakra in energy work, one's true energetic power remains elusive. In the Hindu tradition, the root chakra is shown at the ankle in many ancient diagrams. However, they are continually misinterpreted and place the root at the bottom of the spine. However, in this Chinese diagram, it is clearly showing that the energetic flow moves past the spine down the leg. This new information may not be welcomed by many practitioners who have studied energy work and incorrectly use the bottom of the spine as the location of the root chakra. However, the proof can also be found when putting the correct position of the root chakra into practice. In the Hindu tradition, the root chakra is called the Muladhara and is symbolized by a lotus with 4 petals. So we see the number 4, symbolic for foundation, is represented in the symbolism related to this chakra. The god associated with this region is Indra, who is yellow in color with 4 arms and is mounted upon the white elephant Adavata, who has 7 trunks. In the Rig Veda, Indra is king of gods and a symbol of courage and strength. He is also the god of thunder and rain, and he is the leader of the 33 ethereal deva gods. Indra also becomes a hermit in one of the stories relayed about him in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. Ganesha is also another god associated with this chakra, and according to the Laya Yoga, Ganesha resides in the first chakra called the Muladhara. Mala meaning mane and Adhara meaning base or foundation. The seed mantra for this chakra is I am, and within the Bindu dot it is said Brahma resides. Brahma is the god associated with the life force of the divine source. Brahma is also shown with 4 faces, symbolic for the foundation onto which God consciousness is manifest. Brahma's consort is Dakini, and she is said to be very beautiful with 3 eyes and 4 arms, symbolic of the number 7. And she is also symbolic of the creation forces that emanate from the divine and are manifest onto the physical plane. Tibetan Lama Thubten Yeshi explains the forces associated with Dakini as such. When the completion stage practices have been mastered and we have gained control over our subtle energy winds and so forth, there will come a time when the Dakas and Dakinis will come. Physically embracing such a consort is necessary to bring all the pervading energy winds into the central channel, a prerequisite for opening the heart center and experiencing the profoundest level of clear light. In other words, just as when the student is ready, the teacher appears, so it is with Dakini once a soul is at the first gate, ready to ascend and walk the inner path of the initiate, represented by the hermit. Dakini is the energetic force that embraces and guides each soul. However, once again, we see it is an open heart that illuminates the path and guides the soul. And we see this is also relayed in the hermit card with the lantern held at the heart chakra. In the Hindu tradition, the Kundalini Shakti also emanates from the root chakra. Kundalini represents the energetic force that lays dormant within this energy center until this connecting conduit of energy between Mother Earth and the ethereal body reawakens when the cycle of higher consciousness returns to us. As mentioned earlier, the sacrum chakra is also connected to the same numbers as the root chakra on the ancient Egyptian number key. In the ancient Hindu texts, this energy center is known as the Swatisthana chakra, which translates to one's own abode. On the symbol for this chakra, there is a lotus with 6 petals and a crescent moon, and just as we see the sun represented behind the moon on the tarot card, we also see this connection in the yellow disc behind the crescent on the symbol for this chakra. The connection to the moon and this chakra is also relayed on the Tree of Life in the number 9 Sephirot Yesod. This energy point at the sacrum is both connected to the solar plexus navel chakra and the root chakra. The emotional energy flow between the ka of the soul located at the navel and the foundational instinctive attributes of the earth represented in the root chakra are expressed through the sacrum energy center. This is also where the ethereal union of the twin souls and the divine is represented. Within the bindu, or dot, above the mantra, is the deity Vishnu. Vishnu is symbolic for Orion and God consciousness. So again, we see a direct connection to the divine in the number 9 Sephirot Yesod. In Sufism, it is said the lower energetic forces within this chakra must be tamed before one can be closer to the divine. The sacrum represents the second gate, and this is where the soul must overcome base sexual desires which control the lower mind and physical body through the sacrum and the carnal earthly forces emanating at the root. John 1:5. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And Colossians 2:23. Which things have indeed a shew of wisdom in will worship and humility and neglecting of the body, not in any honour to the satisfying of the flesh. And finally, 1 John 4:4. Ye are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. Now we have covered the 7 primary energy centers and their relating tarot cards and encoded numbers. Let us look at the remaining cards within the major arcana to help us better understand the evolution and processes of the twin souls as they ascend back up the 7 gates to reunite with God consciousness and be crowned as an illuminated soul within a new cycle. Let us first start with the number 10 Wheel of Fortune card. This card is symbolic of the destiny and journey of the twin souls. Not only do we see the infinite cycle symbolized by the number 10 when divided by the Trinity, but also the covenant and destiny of each twin soul is represented in the 2 5s within the number 10. There is a wheel with 8 spokes, symbolic of the immortal soul, with each spoke relating to a different point in the cycle and journey of the soul. On the top of the wheel, we see the Sphinx is representing God's presence within the soul and the will of God upon the destiny of the twin souls. The sword the Sphinx holds is symbolic for the word or law of God, and we see this in these verses. Ephesians 6:17. The sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and Hebrews 4:12. For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. The half-dog, half-human creature is symbolic of the Hierophant, and we can see a similar representation of the Hierophant in religious symbolism, and even Anubis, who is present at the weighing of the heart ceremony. The Hierophant is related to the covenant of each soul. This is the pact each soul has made with God, and that each soul must uphold. On the bottom of the card, we see the twin souls represented in both the physical and the ethereal by the beasts with wings, and we see at the top left we have the angel representing the divine forces, and the bird is symbolic of the ethereal. This card is relating to the knowledge and understanding of ourselves that brings us to the path that leads us back to the union with the divine. The next card is number 11, Justice, and we have looked into the relating energy center, the navel and solar plexus, which is the location of our Ka soul, and the point where we access and express our power from. The navel chakra is symbolic for the 3rd gate and shows that it is the right and just soul that moves beyond this gate to the heart, And we see in this verse 2 Chronicles 1:11, "And God said to Solomon, because this was in thine heart, and thou hast not asked riches, wealth, or honour, nor the life of thine enemies, neither yet hast asked long life, but hast asked wisdom and knowledge for thyself, that thou mayest judge my people, over whom I have made thee king." So it is the knowledge and wisdom of the soul that illuminates the path of righteousness, and the soul instead only strives for truth, and as such finds thine heart. And in Hebrews 11:33, we see that it is the righteous and faithful that have the inner strength to subdue the beast. And note that within this number of the verse, we have the number 33, which equates to the crown chakra. "Who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions." Our next card is number 12, the Hanged Man. This card represents the soul that is spiritually preparing to begin the ascent back to God consciousness. The number 12 represents the unreunited Trinity on the material plane. The hanging on the cross represents the complete abandonment of all that has held the soul in bondage to the material plane. The hanging man is connected to Jesus on the cross and Odin on the tree. It is the complete surrendering of the soul to the divine within, removing all the mental and spiritual anchors that prevent the soul from ascending the gates. Once the soul has removed these mental and spiritual shackles, the internal path becomes illuminated. The number 13 Death card has been covered in depth in previous videos, and as discussed, this is symbolic of the death of the physical container upon reunification with the divine. Number 14 is connected to Temperance. Temperance is symbolic for the divine path of the soul and the soul's covenant, as we see 1 and 4 equate to 5. This path is being represented on the card beside the angel and leads into the mountains, where there is a shining crown symbolized. This is showing that if the covenant is upheld, the inner path is revealed and the divinity within the soul will be realized. Divine consciousness is within the ether and is being poured from the top cup to fill the bottom cup on the lower ethereal planes. We can also see the sun represented in the circle with the dot upon the angel's head, and the head is glowing, symbolic of the light of God transmuted through the sun. And the triangle on the angel's heart is representing the Trinity, and this shows if the correct path can be found, then the soul is crowned with Christ consciousness. Number 15 is related to the Devil card, and as discussed in depth in previous videos, is symbolic for the physical bondage of the soul that remains in ignorance, controlled by the base energies of the material plane. The number 16 Tower card is related to the ethereal, as 1 and 6 equate to 7. This is a highly emotive card and looks very connected to the physical, and in some ways it is, for it is showing that it is the shaking of our physical foundations that cause the soul to discover inner strength. Again, we see this also relayed with Daniel and the lions, where in the darkest hours of despair, Daniel learns the truth of himself and therefore discovers his immortality. The male and female twin souls are shown falling from the tower. On the male side, there are 12 golden leaves, and on the female side, she has 10. The 12 is symbolic for the unreunited twin souls on the material plane, and the number 10 shows the covenants of the twin soul and the infinite cycle of its evolution. This card is symbolic for the destined events that the soul cannot avoid, shown by the lightning bolt from above. And it is these events of pain and disruption that the opportunity of spiritual growth and inner strength can be found. Card number 17 is the Star, and we have discussed this card in detail within previous videos also. The star is symbolic of the soul's potential illumination at the time of the cycle when the light of the Creator, symbolized by the eight-pointed star, returns to us. Number 18 is the moon card. Again, we have discussed this card in detail in previous videos. The moon represents the ethereal plane and energies that govern the emotions of the soul. Card number 19 is the sun and represents the physical plane, but also the potential of God manifest through the soul onto the material plane. The child wears 7 flowers upon the head representing the ethereal self. There is also a red feather upon the head, symbolizing Orion and the Christ light being transmuted through the sun and illuminating and purifying the soul, symbolized by the child on the white horse. The red cloth is representing the divinity within the soul, and the 4 sunflowers represent earth and foundation. Number 20 is the judgment card. This is the equivalent of the weighing of the heart ceremony, when the light of the Creator returns to fully illuminate each soul. The number 20 is also connected to the heart on the ancient Egyptian number key. So again, we see that it is through the heart, full of light, that we are granted access through the 6th gate to reunite with the divine. On the card, we see that the souls are represented in a grey-bluish colour, representing their physical containers. As we saw with the death card, when we are manifest in the physical form on the material plane, we are essentially in death. And this is what is represented in the judgment card and why the souls are shown in coffins. We can also see across the water that the ethereal plane is represented, and there are also souls that wait in judgment, and this is because the light of the Creator illuminates both the physical and ethereal planes, and those souls who have passed over into the ethereal are also weighed. Psalms 107:20. He sends his word and heals them and delivers them from their graves. John 5:28. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming, in which all that are in the graves shall hear his voice. The trumpet is symbolic of the divine resonance that awakens the souls and brings with it healing and protection, symbolized by the flag with the red cross. We see again a connection to the Freemasons and the Red Cross, as they have within their organization the Order of the Red Cross. Lastly, we have number 21, the World card, and we see in the number 21 it is representing the Trinity that have reunited and now separated once again at the beginning of a cycle at the height of consciousness. The World card is symbolic of what all souls in higher consciousness have in their power. The female is represented in the middle with the 2 scrolls representing the Word of God and the complete divine knowledge they now have access to. She is also symbolic of the female creation forces that birth the souls onto the material plane. Around her is a wreath representing the full cycle being completed, and the soul has now been rewarded with knowledge and the full understanding of their divinity. On the top and bottom of the wreath, we see that the infinity symbol is being represented. Therefore, we have a connection to the number 88 and the male and female twin souls depicted here also. Around the outside of the wreath, we see a man and 3 animals. The man represents the male twin soul birthed through into the new cycle with the female creational forces. The eagle is symbolic of the ethereal energies and the ether, while the lion is symbolic of inner strength and courage. The bull is referring to inner wisdom. Both animals are also representing the physical attributes of the soul. So now, thanks to the ancient Egyptian number key and the other keys hidden as symbols within the tarot cards, we have revealed the story of ourselves, the story that has been stolen and coveted by religious institutions and secret organizations. However, we have only just scratched the surface of this truth of who we are. And that truth is, we are much more than just our physical containers, but are powerful beyond our imaginings. each soul with part of the divine within us. And it is this divine spark within us that is illuminated when the light of Orion and Christ consciousness returns at the end of the cycle. And it is then that our hearts are weighed and the worthiness of the soul is measured. Each of us has traversed this journey over the eons to get to the moment in time we now stand. In the next video, I will reveal the ancient Egyptian number key that has allowed us to unlock this knowledge about who we really are. Mark 4:22. For there is nothing hid which shall not be manifested, neither was anything kept secret, but that it should come abroad.